Hello, welcome to our Dark Souls 3 lore watch. We're gonna watch a bunch of lore, mostly by Vati Vidya, but this one's by Dave Control, and this is called Dark Souls 3 Lore: The Story. So kick back, get some popcorn, put some pickled twang salt in it. By the way, put some pickled twang salt in it if you know what's good for you. And enjoy. Hope it's not muted.
Self-warned.
It's muted.
Also, bear in mind this video was created pre-DLC.
Gwyn
The
and the
world
fading
of Dark
flame.
Souls began with the Age of Ancients, a time when the world was still unformed, filled with great crags and arch trees, and ruled by the mighty everlasting stone dragons.
We're getting DS1 lore right here,
Then
gamers.
there was fire. And with fire came despair.
Yo, shout out to them for having subtitles.
This fire, known as the First Flame, brought with it the mighty Lord Souls. The Lord Souls were found by four beings: Nitro, first of the dead, who would find the soul of death; the Witch of Izalith and her daughters of chaos, who found the life soul; the furtive pygmy, progenitor of humanity, who found a dark soul; and Gwyn, the Lord of Light, who would find the light soul. Gwyn led the charge, with the Witch of Izalith and Nitro, who fought with the everlasting dragons for dominion over the world. With the help of Seath the
Coward!
Sealess, who betrayed
Betrayer!
his own kind, the three were able to defeat the dragons and take rule over the land, which would become known as Lordran. Gwyn ruled for a time, creating a mighty kingdom out of Lordran. He had three known children: his firstborn, Guinevere, and Gwendolyn.
Guinevere, what's up,
and they
Guinevere?
ruled over the land,
What's up,
becoming known
Guinevere?
as gods to those who followed them, with people such as Gwyn's uncle, Allfather Lloyd, helping to further this gospel. However, like the Age of Ancients, nothing lasts forever. As suddenly as the first flame erupted, it was beginning to fade, and with the fading of the flame came the unwanted. Undead humans began to rise, becoming everlasting in their own right. Only, as time progressed, they would go more and more insane until becoming fully hollow. And
That was me
with
over
the fading of the
COVID, chat.
flame, the time of the Lords, and specifically time of Gwyn and his children's rule, was coming to an end. Gwyn devised a plan. Why not reinvigorate the fire? Why not use both himself and his remaining Lord Soul as kindling to the flame to further the Age of Fire and rule of his children?
Parry him!
Lord Gwyn, bearer of the ultimate soul, divided that power among his great clan before linking the fire. Gwyn executed his plan, and the Age of Fire was extended. For a time.
Just for a little bit.
Gwyn's solution to the fading flame was only temporary, and as such, a new plan needed to be devised. This plan was executed by his son, Gwendolyn,
Bro,
and
fuck
loyal
this
servant
boss fight.
Prompt.
Chosen undead, your fate is to succeed the great Lord Gwyn, so that you may link the fire, cast away the dark, and undo the curse of the undead.
And, with the lure of becoming a great lord, a chosen
What's up,
undead
mommy?
was manipulated into killing the other great lords, Nitro and the Witch of Izalith, in order to collect.
Melissa, you're so right. I skipped Gwendolyn, and that's the only boss I haven't fought. Which is so weird, because now I feel like I'm such... Elden Ring made me a completionist. Whereas like, I need to see everything. I need to fight everything. And Gwendolyn, I just skipped because I was like, I hate this. I'm like 5 tries in, and I just keep getting, I hate this. I was so mad.
Lord. A chosen undead was manipulated into killing the other great lords, Nitro and the Witch of Izalith, in order to collect their souls. They were also tasked with collecting Gwyn's remaining soul, which had been bequeathed to his followers, Seath and the four kings of New Londo.
Bequeath.
And then, after collecting these, using them as kindling for the first flame. However, there was an unspoken catch. As the undead absorbed and collected these souls, filling a lord vessel allowing passage to the kiln of the first flame, they now had power within them, and would have to burn as well in order to provide enough kindling to the fire in order to continue the Age of Fire. And whether the chosen undead of Dark Souls 1 continued the flame, or it was another, the fire was linked, and the Age of Fire allowed to continue. As time progressed, the cycle continued. Time and time again, the
Never
fire
seen
would
this,
begin
chat.
to fade, and someone would be sent to rekindle the fire, linking the flame and allowing everyone else to live on. Since Lord Gwyn, the first Lord of Cinder, many exalted lords have linked the first flame, and it is their very souls that have manifested themselves as defender of the flame. Every soul who would come to link the flame, or take it away, would be tested by Gwyn, and eventually a manifestation of every previous being to link the flame, working together to sustain the Age of Fire. Collectively they stand, eternally guarding the first flame and the keepers of their age and their time, determined to live on, determined not to fade away like the flame they protect. For their lives and the lives of their offspring all depended on the life of their flame. And thus...
Chat, I had no idea that Plin Plin Plon was a meme. Had no idea. When everybody started typing in chat, I didn't know that that was like a known Dark Souls meme.
Flame. Every soul who would come to link the flame or take it away.
I ended up Googling it because I ended up watching that part of the VOD back. And then I saw everybody typing in Plin Plin Plon, and I typed it in, and I was like, oh, this is an actual, like, worldwide internet meme of playing the Gwyn theme song, Plin 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 Plon. Yeah, like, spelled out like this, chat. I saw several people in chat saying it, and I had no idea what they were referring to, and it's Gwyn's theme song.
Be tested by Gwyn, and eventually a manifestation of every previous being to link the flame, working together to sustain the Age of Fire. Collectively they stand, eternally guarding the first flame and the keepers of their age and their time, determined to live on, determined not to fade away like the flame they protect. For their lives and the lives of their offspring all depended on the life of their flame. And thus a ritual was born, a ritual that began with the events of Dark Souls 1 and one that would evolve over time as it became set in stone. A being would become a Lord of Cinder and required to sacrifice themselves to continue the Age of Fire for the benefit of all who cherish this age. And how long exactly has this cycle continued? Well, the Firekeepers of Firelink Shrine preserve the bonfire and serve its champion. They are said to have soothed and accepted the dark sigil which has tainted their soul, and yet their soul will one day embed itself in the bosom of another Firekeeper.
Bosom.
These Firekeepers are led to the bell tower when their
My
duty
wife.
is complete, a grave of Firekeepers past. When a Firekeeper has served her purpose, she is led to true darkness where she enjoyed a long-deserved sleep.
Damn.
For countless ages, this ritual continued, perfected and evolved over time.
This was messed up. Dueling serpents.
During the fading of the fire, two primordial serpents appeared and made themselves known to the undead, Kingseeker Frompt and Darkstalker Koth. Frompt allied himself with Gwyn and sought to further the Age of Fire.
I must admit, I am fond of you humans. May you enjoy serendipity, and may the Age of Fire perpetuate.
And after leading the chosen undead of Dark Souls 1 towards their fate of linking the fire,
Throated
it seems
me.
Frompt hadn't completed his mission. He went on to help found a great kingdom which would be called Lothric. Statues of him can be found throughout the grand archives of Lothric, and the Lothric bloodline was obsessed with creating a worthy heir.
Bro, he founded it, bro? He founded it? The Throgoat founded it? Wow. Lyric, thanks for 16 months of support. Thank you very, very much. I didn't know this. I just wonder why there was a bunch of statues around him.
Fire.
Peter
I
Frampton.
must admit, I am fond of you humans. May you enjoy serendipity, and may the Age of Fire perpetuate.
And after leading the chosen undead of Dark Souls 1 towards their fate of linking the fire,
Break the chain.
it seems Frompt hadn't completed his mission. He went on to help found a great kingdom which would be called Lothric. Statues of him can be found throughout the grand archives of Lothric, and the Lothric bloodline was obsessed with creating a worthy heir, and when this proved impossible, resorted to unspeakable means. Suffice it to say, the path to linking the fire is a cursed one indeed.
I kind of wish you ended up fighting like a similar to how in Lord of the Rings Extended Edition, you have the mouth of Sauron, and it's like a personification of this Dark Lord. Like, here's this person that kind of embodies it. I wish there was that version of Frampt. That'd be cool. I want to fight the throat goat. I want to go toe-to-toe, throat-to-throat, you know?
The Firelink Shrine of Dark Souls 3 is directly connected to Lothric Castle, and multiple Lord Vessels, similar to the one required to enter the Kiln of the First Flame in Dark Souls 1, can be found throughout the Kingdom of Lothric. One in the High Wall of Lothric, another in Lothric Castle, yet another in the Untended Graves, and of course, one in Firelink Shrine itself, creating a
325 plus 300 fees. There's no way Mike paid that little for his basketball tickets. I think he's embarrassed. Mike, show us the receipts. Show us how much you really spent for those basketball tickets, okay? Love you, bro. Congratulations on your XCast episode.
a worthy heir, and when this proved impossible, resorted to unspeakable means. Suffice it to say, the path to linking the fire is a cursed one indeed. The Firelink Shrine of Dark Souls 3 is directly connected to Lothric Castle, and multiple Lord Vessels, similar to the one required to enter the Kiln of the First Flame in Dark Souls 1, can be found throughout the Kingdom of Lothric. One in the High Wall of Lothric,
Whoa.
Another in Lothric Castle, yet another in the Untended Graves,
Didn't even realize that.
and of course, one in Firelink Shrine itself. We also find the Queen of Lothric, married to Osiris, often visited the Untended Graves. She had an ashen
That's how
Estus
you
ring-
spell that fucking wet dude's name? The big wet blue guy? That's how you pronounce it? I thought it was like Osiris.
itself. We also find the Queen of Lothric,
He's a wet dude. What do you mean? He's a wet dude. If I was like, hey, what's the name of the wet guy in Dark Souls 3? You'd be like, oh, Osiris, you know?
married to Osiris, often visited the Untended Graves. She had an ashen Estus ring, once a treasure brought before Lothric's queen, enshrined in the Cemetery of Untended Graves, while there's a grave in Lothric that sees no visitors, a dark place where rootless warriors rest. The Queen of Lothric alone cared to wish these poor souls good fortune. Finally, there's evidence the Shrine Handmaid who resides in Firelink Shrine may have been one of the High Priestesses who formed the three pillars that were the foundation of Lothric. In Dark Firelink Shrine, the Shrine Handmaid not only sells the Priestess Ring, but also drops it when killed.
Whoa, I didn't know that. I didn't even think about killing
And
her.
while Frampt influenced the Lothric bloodline to watch over the linking of the fire, ensuring the tradition was kept, Darkstalker Koth had other intentions.
Chat, be honest with me. How many of y'all killed her? When y'all knew it was time, and when you knew it was go time, how many of y'all killed her? I'm not a monster. Why would I do anything to a nice old lady? Exactly. Chat, y'all could learn.
There's a grave in Lothric that sees no visitors, a dark place where rootless warriors rest. The Queen of Lothric alone cared to wish these poor souls good fortune. Finally, there's evidence the Shrine Handmaid who resides in Firelink Shrine may have been one of the High Priestesses who formed the three pillars that were the foundation of Lothric. In Dark Firelink Shrine, the Shrine Handmaid not only sells the Priestess Ring, but also drops it when killed. And while Frampt influenced the Lothric bloodline to watch over the linking of the fire, ensuring the tradition was kept, Darkstalker Koth had other intentions.
Gwyn has blurred your past to prevent the birth of the Dark Lord. I am the primordial serpent. I seek to right the wrongs of the past, to discover our true Lord. But the other serpent, Frampt, lost his sense and befriended Lord Gwyn.
Koth found himself involved with the land of Londor.
We need a sitcom with Frampt and Koth. We need a sitcom. An HBO Max, or now just Max sitcom. Something of these two dudes just living in an apartment in New York City. And call it The Throat and the Goat.
Fire, ensuring the tradition was kept, Darkstalker Koth had other intentions.
Gwyn has blurred your past to prevent the birth of the Dark Lord. I am the primordial serpent. I seek to right the wrongs of the past, to discover our true Lord. But the other serpent, Frampt, lost his sense and befriended Lord Gwyn.
Koth found himself involved with the land of Londor, the land of Hollows. Londor, the Hollow Realm, is a society of undead, comprised of the corpses and shades of those who led unsavory lives. It's run by the Sable Black Church of Londor, founded by Lillian, Uria, and a third. These maidens of a primordial serpent...
I don't remember her.
The land of Hollows. Londor, the Hollow Realm, is a society of undead, comprised of the corpses and shades of those who led unsavory lives. It's run by the Sable Black Church of Londor, founded by Lillian, Uria, and a third.
Damn.
These maidens of
like a
primordial serpent were renowned as founders of the Sable Church, which offered salvation for Hollows. We also know this primordial serpent as Koth, as upon killing Uria, she'll protest...
Koth.
You think I talked to her once? Word?
Unsavory lives. It's run by the Sable Black Church of Londor, founded by Lillian, Uria, and a third. These maidens of a primordial serpent were renowned as founders of the Sable Church, which offered salvation for Hollows. We also know this primordial serpent as Koth, as upon killing Uria, she'll protest...
Koth.
Damn. Feels bad.
Following the teachings of Koth, Londor's goal became the opposite of Lothric, making certain their lord claims the flame for the sake of all Hollows.
The Age of Fire was founded by the old gods, sustained by the linking of the fire. But the gods are no more, and the all-powerful fire deserveth a new heir. Our Lord of Hollows, it shall be, who weareth the true face of mankind.
Given the number of firekeepers who have been thrown into the tower, it's hard to tell just how long the cycle of linking the fire has been going on, and when the Kingdom of Lothric became involved. We do know of 4 lords who would end up linking the fire, and thereby becoming Lords of Cinder.
Aldrich, Saint of the Deep.
A right and proper cleric, only he developed a habit of devouring men. He ate so many that he bloated like a drowned pig, then softened into sludge. So they stuck him in the Cathedral of the Deep.
Messed up,
and they made
dude.
him a Lord of Cinder. Not
You're
for
right, this dude
virtue,
is wet.
but for might.
Aldrich, who seemed to be a cleric in the Way of White, which had a foundation built around worshipping Gwyn, was forced into becoming a Lord of Cinder due to his might after having eaten so many.
That's so gross, dude.
Virtue, but for might.
Like, I remember this conversation. I just, of course, never put it together that that dude was that dude.
And they made him a Lord of Cinder, not for virtue,
So cool.
but for might.
Aldrich, who seemed to be a cleric in the Way of White, which had a foundation built
The
around
Way of White. Come on, dude. Like, we can't be doing that. I'm canceling him for sure. You're canceled. Sorry. We can't have that here.
worshipping Gwyn, was forced into becoming a Lord of Cinder due to his might after having eaten so many.
Farron's undead legion, the Abyss watches.
In the land of Farron,
So
what
cool.
Ulasil and the Darkroot Basin / Garden would become, rose the Undead Legion.
The Undead Legion of Farron is a caravan of undead, sworn by wolf's blood to contain the abyss. The Legion will bury a kingdom at the first sign of exposure.
So
It
badass.
seems this caravan who shared in the wolf's blood were duty-bound to contain the abyss, a spreading darkness. As the fading fire would create an age of dark, this would be counter to their belief, and the Watchers of the Abyss swore upon their shared wolf's blood, which also served as their mandate as lords. Together, with the shared wolf's blood, they became a singular Lord of Cinder.
Yorm the Giant.
Yorm, a descendant of an ancient conqueror, led the people of the profane capital. A curse of a profane flame was haunting the capital, triggered by the curse of malformed inhabitants. Yorm decided to step in order to save his people, and one dear to him, lonely Yorm became a Lord of Cinder to put the profaned flame to rest, knowing full well that those who spoke of him as Lord were quite insincere. However, this backfired on him, and the profaned capital was consumed by the fire after Yorm became a Lord of Cinder. And finally, Ludlith of Kurland, who claims to become a Lord of Cinder by choice.
I took the mantle of
This little
Lord
dude.
of Cinder of mine own volition. I speak these words with pride.
Although, given Ludlith has no legs in way of leaving his throne, it's quite possible he was forced into becoming a Lord of Cinder.
Before I was a Lord of Cinder, I was a student of transposition, the process of extracting and coalescing the essence of a soul. A forbidden art that once left a foul stain upon Corland's honor.
Ludlith carries a skull ring, one of Kurland's transposed wonders, derived from the soul of a soul feeder. The soul feeder was a beast that insatiably absorbed souls to feed its own power. Even after its accursed corpse was burned, it's said that the pungent stench of souls left the air permanently stained.
Ew.
It's very possible that Ludlith transposed this very beast, and in doing so drastically dishonored Kurland, he was forced into becoming a Lord of Cinder. I'm also of the belief that, in order to become a Lord of Cinder, the Lord must be pumped full of souls. Aldrich was full of
Ew.
souls by eating so many people, and thereby forced into becoming a Lord of Cinder, as he was the perfect candidate.
Makes sense.
Likewise, perhaps by transposing the Soul Feeder, Ludlith unwittingly pumped himself full of souls, and therefore quite...
If these guys are like, hey, if you want to become Lord of Cinder, you can do all this crazy stuff, or if you could do a backflip, you're in. Stoneback Mike, we gotta get him in. We gotta get him into becoming Lord of Cinder.
accidentally primed himself into
What's up,
becoming a Lord
Tasmo?
of Cinder. And as each of these Lords of Cinder accepted their fate, the Age of Fire was allowed to continue. However, what would happen if someone prepped to be a Lord of Cinder refused?
That'd be me, chat. That'd be me. I'd get the email to become a Lord of Cinder, and I'd be like, oh man, what day is that? Damn, I have the morning free the next day, but I was really looking forward to sleeping in that night. I'm gonna leave them on red for a bit, and if they email me back, kind of with a follow up and like, hey, just checking in again, wanted to see if you want to become Lord of Cinder. No rush, no worries. I'll be like, man, you know. It could be like jury duty, Dylan. I could just pretend I never got the email. Went straight to spam. I'm so sorry. Do I think the Lord of Cinders get paid days off? They've got to have, like, really bad insurance.
King Osiris and his queen had 3 children, Lorien, Lothric, and Ocelot. Lorien was raised to be a great knight and potentially the next king of the Lothric line. Lothric, his younger twin brother, was meant to bring honor to the family by being turned into a Lord of Cinder and linking the fire. And Ocelot we know very little about, except that after giving birth to Ocelot, her youngest, the Queen of Lothric quietly disappeared.
Damn.
Meanwhile, the queen, who was initially revered as a goddess of fertility and bounty, had another child, Gertrude, who was associated with Gwyn's child, Guinevere. As Divine Blessing of
What's
Dark
up?
Souls 3 describes the queen as being a goddess of fertility and bounty, and Divine Blessing of Dark Souls 1 tells the goddess of sunlight, Guinevere, daughter of the great Lord of Sunlight Gwyn, is cherished by all as the symbol of bounty and fertility. It's very likely the Queen of Lothric is in fact Guinevere. The queen had a holy maiden,
Interesting.
Gertrude, and the heavenly daughter is said to be the queen's child. If the queen is Guinevere, then it's likely Gertrude was a daughter of a former marriage.
Like, you didn't need to keep showing her, but we're all happy you did. You didn't need to, but we're happy you did. Those chichis are out of hand. God. I love Mexican people. I haven't heard the word like chiches or chichis in a long time. That's why it was always funny to me that Chi-Chi was a character in Dragon Ball. Or Dragon Ball Z or whatever.
The Princess of Sunlight, Guinevere, left Anor Londo among
Just watching Andy's eye shift. What do you mean, bro? What are you talking about? I'm watching I'm listening to the lore, dude. The glare doesn't cover it? Fuck. I guess I gotta rewind a little bit.
In Divine Blessing of Dark Souls 1 tells the goddess of sunlight, Guinevere, daughter of the great lord of sunlight Gwyn, is cherished by all as the symbol of bounty and fertility. It's very likely the Queen of Lothric is in fact Guinevere. The queen had a holy maiden Gertrude, and the heavenly daughter is said to be the queen's child. If the queen is Guinevere, then it's likely Gertrude was a daughter of a former marriage. The Princess of Sunlight, Guinevere, left Anor Londo among many other deities and later became wife to flame god Flann. Gertrude was visited by an angel who revealed the tale Divine Pillars of Light to her, which became the foundation of the angelic faith of Lothric. This seemed to spark a civil war within the kingdom of Lothric, and the worship of the divine messengers was viewed as heresy in Lothric and unrecognized by any of their 3 pillars of rule. This is believed to be why
Gertrude... dude? Did I fight this dude? Oh man, rewind here. Crazy.
Daughter of a former marriage. The Princess of Sunlight, Guinevere, left Anor Londo among many other deities and later became wife to flame god Flann. Gertrude was visited by an angel who revealed the tale Divine Pillars of Light to her, which became the foundation of the angelic faith of Lothric. This seemed to spark a civil war within the kingdom of Lothric, and the worship of the divine messengers was viewed as heresy in Lothric and unrecognized by any of their 3 pillars of rule. This is believed to be why Gertrude, the heavenly daughter, was imprisoned in the lofty cell of the Grand Archives. Gertrude's presumed body in the cell of the Grand Archives is surrounded by feathers, and we find the very same feathers within Prince Lothric and Lorien's room. The Lothric bloodline was obsessed with creating a worthy heir, and when this proved impossible, resorted to unspeakable means. Suffice it to say, the path to linking the fire is a cursed one indeed. It seems plausible that, in order to create a worthy heir out of Lothric, the royal family tortured Gertrude, which adversely affected Prince Lothric. He was meant to be a champion and was expected to wield this platinum holy sword, but some things will remain distant dreams forever. Either born crippled or turned into such by the effects of the Lothric line attempting to turn him into a Lord of Cinder, he grew skeptical of the Age of Fire. Meanwhile, the first of the scholars doubted the linking of the fire and was alleged to be a private mentor to the royal prince. The first scholar, be it Aldi of Dark Souls 2 and the scholar of the First Sin, or perhaps Pontiff Sullivan, whose Outrider Knight is guarding the very spell that describes the first scholar doubting the linking of the fire, seemed to have planted doubt in the mind of Lothric, and all of this led him to refuse his bloodline's duty.
Mind you, the mantle of Lord interests me none. The fire-linking curse, the legacy of lords, let it all fade into nothing.
When the link of fire is threatened, the bell tolls, unearthing the old lords of Cinder from their graves.
Graves?
It's my belief, and this is speculation, that as the fire fades, it needs more and more souls in order to be rekindled to its former glory. As Prince Lothric refused to kindle the fire, it faded to a point where it needed even more souls, and thus a safety catch was created. A bell would toll, causing the former Lords of Cinder to rise, who would need to re-sacrifice themselves to the fire along with the latest Lord of Cinder. However, linking the fire isn't a pleasant affair.
It singeeth to the bone. It hurts. Please, help me. Be done with me. No, gods, no. I cannot bear it.
This is terrifying.
It burns. Help me.
And the former
Why do
Lord
they always have the most goated voice actors? It's crazy.
of Cinder refused to relink the fire. When Aldrich ruminated on the fading of the fire, it inspired visions of a coming age of the deep sea. He knew the path would be arduous, but he had no fear. He would devour the gods himself. Aldrich instead chose to welcome the new age and
You looked away and thought it was Andy? It's because the audio was so front and center, the way it was mixed there. It sounded like it wasn't part of the video.
It burns. Help me.
And the former Lords of Cinder refused to relink the fire. When Aldrich ruminated on the fading of the fire, it inspired visions of the coming age of the deep sea. He
Yeah,
knew
they're
the
taking the
path
raw
would be
files.
arduous, but he had no fear. He would devour the gods himself. Aldrich instead chose to welcome the new age and become a god of it by eating the other gods. Yorm, coming back to a kingdom devoured by the very profane flame he had tried to prevent, and thusly losing someone important to him, seemed to have lost hope. As a lord, Yorm risked everything and fought unflinchingly as a one-man vanguard. Following the loss of the one he wished to protect, he forsook his shield. It seems he lost himself and no longer cared for the Age of Fire. Meanwhile, the Undead Legion seemed to lose their minds. With their goal to wipe out and stop any spreading dark and Sign of the Abyss, they perpetually remain in the Farron catacombs, killing one another as they continuously rise in undead and tainted by the dark. All of this leading to the slow fading of the flame and a perfect opening for the worshippers of the Sable
Dude, what a crazy existence. Like, that's your only existence, is to rise from the dead and kill each other.
With their goal to wipe out and stop any spreading dark and Sign of the Abyss, they perpetually remain in the Farron catacombs, killing one another as they continuously rise in undead and tainted by the dark. All of this leading to the slow fading of the flame and a perfect opening for the worshippers of the Sable Church of Londor.
In venturing north, the pilgrims discover the truth of the old words.
Oh, this is the cutscene you find right on that cliff, right? From that lady when you're kind of over, I guess, the start of the DLC? Is this that cutscene she shows you?
The pilgrims discover the truth of the old words. The fire fades.
A pilgrimage from Londor commenced.
Oh, this is the intro? Oh, I thought this was... No, I guess she doesn't show you a cutscene. I guess she just delivers dialogue and kind of tells you. Oh, it's the intro. Okay, my bad. Yo, what up, Jared? How's it going, homie?
The pilgrims traveling to Lothric in order to further the goal set by Koth himself, to find a Dark Lord. Their mission was to find a powerful Hollow and influence them into making the flame for themselves and bringing a new Dark Age ruled by the Hollow. We see pilgrim butterflies flying towards Lothric's location and circling around it. While we know very little about the pilgrim butterflies, outside of the fact that Dragonslayer armor guarding the bridge to the Grand Archives is controlled by them, it seems they could be one of two things. We find mutated hollows throughout the high...
Chat, is there a way in this fight? Because I went back to this fight, like, you know, I always like rewatch the videos and I see what chat is saying during the boss fights. And there was a couple of people that were like, don't tell him the secret, or like, don't hint too much. Was there a way that I could have killed this flying thing and he would have died? Is that possible in the game?
Little about the pilgrim butterflies, outside of the fact that Dragonslayer armor guarding the bridge to the Grand Archives is controlled by
You don't
them.
think so? Oh, okay.
It seems they could be one of two things. We find mutated hollows throughout the high wall of Lothric, turning into either trees or something reminiscent of the pilgrim butterfly. So it could be that. Or the only other time we hear pilgrim is in relation to the visitors from Londor. So there's a possibility that after their pilgrimage to Lothric, as they all seem to be heading towards Lothric Castle, being that we find them both on the bridge to Lothric and the way to the main castle itself, these could very likely be what the pilgrims have become. And considering they encircle Prince Lothric and seem to guard him with Dragonslayer armor, I think it's very likely these are the pilgrims of Londor trying to not only prevent outsiders from intruding and dragging him into linking the flame, but also to prevent him from leaving. Once reaching Lothric Castle, it seems we find the true state of things. An eclipse is over the sun, and Firelink Shrine has gone dark. This is where Champion Gundr seems to come into play.
Dude, what a freaking boss fight Champion Gundr was. I always thought it was Gundyr, but this is an awesome boss fight.
From intruding and dragging him into linking the flame, but also to prevent him from leaving. Once reaching Lothric Castle, it seems we find the true state of things.
Love a good eclipse.
An eclipse is over the sun, and Firelink Shrine has gone dark. This is where Champion Gundr seems to come into play. Once, a champion came late to the festivities and was greeted by a shrine without fire and a bell that would not toll. He wields a halberd which he received when he was charged with his duty. I think it's possible Champion Gundr was tasked with collecting the Lords of Cinder himself, However, he was too late and the fire had already faded.
Oh shit.
Gunder is a giant, as indicated by his in-game size, and is restrained by a prisoner's chain, which was a portion of steel chain used to restrain Gunder. Given that we find a giant coffin in the Cemetery of Ash, I find it likely Gunder was the one who was meant to be the initial backup plan to gather the Lords of Cinder if they refused to link the fire, hence why they chose a champion. This is also indicated to me
That's cool.
by Hidden Blessing, which states, "There's a grave in Lothric that sees no visitors, a dark place where rootless warriors rest. The Queen of Lothric alone cared to wish these poor souls good fortune." I think this is because everyone else was likely relying on Champion Gunder to get the job done. Gunder would only rise after the bell had rung. However,
Instead, I beat him in one try. Jesus, dude. I mean, what a bad day for this dude, huh? His first tried his ass.
the Queen of Lothric alone cared to wish these poor souls good fortune.
Fucking
I think
gamer.
this is because everyone else was
Crazy.
likely relying on Champion Gunder to get the job done. Gunder would only rise after the bell had rung. However, for some reason he was late in this cycle and the fire had already faded. It's possible this is because the entire Lothric bloodline was preoccupied instead of paying attention to their custom. Lothric and Lorien refused to link the fire, the Queen had left, and King Osiris had gone insane. Thusly, Champion Gunder, or the Belated Champion, became a sheath to a coiled sword in the hopes that someday the First Flame would be linked once more. He would eventually become a Eudex, or judge, for the Ashen who might rise and deem them worthy or not of the great task that lay ahead.
Oh, wow.
This coiled sword is only bequeathed to chosen Ash, as judged by the Eudex, who awaits the arrival of Ash as a scabbard.
You call that guy
As
a
the
wet
fire-
dude? I wouldn't call him
Gunder
a
was
wet
the one
dude.
fortune. I think for some reason he was late in this cycle.
I guess
and the
he's
fire
wet
had
here,
already
yeah.
Faded. It's possible this is because the entire Lothric bloodline was preoccupied instead of paying attention to their custom. Lothric and Lorien refused to link the fire, the Queen had left, and King Osiris had gone in.
Oh, you mean this wet dude? Yeah, the wet dude right here. Sorry. Super wet, right? Like, look at this guy. This guy's dripping.
Insane. Thusly, Champion Gunder, or the Belated Champion, became a sheath to a coiled sword in the hopes that someday the First Flame would be linked
Eudex.
once more. He would eventually become a Eudex, or judge, for the
Cool
Ashen
word.
who might rise and deem them worthy or not of the great task that lay ahead. This coiled sword is only bequeathed to chosen Ash, as judged by the Eudex, who awaits the arrival of Ash as a scabbard. As the fire was fading, there's one singular lord who returned to his throne, Ludlith. It could be that he arose from the throne itself, as he has no legs, or that he somehow traveled on his own. Either way, he was present as the fire was fading. We can surmise this as he has direct knowledge of what happened. Upon finding the eyes of the firekeeper, Ludlith will tell us.
Ah, found her, did we? And the black eyes that shimmer within I see. 'Tis as if it were but yesterday. We did all we could to spare her from them. Much has happened since. Mayhap I should apprise thee of what the thin light of these eyes might reveal to the eyeless firekeeper. Scenes of betrayal, things never intended for her ken, visions of this age's end.
And, witnessing this himself, Ludlith decided to do something
That
different.
audio was just like in my brain. Did you feel that in your... I felt it in my brain, rattling around in there.
Much has happened since. Mayhap I should apprise thee of what the thin light of these eyes might reveal to the eyeless firekeeper. Scenes of betrayal, things never intended for her
For her ken. I've never heard that.
ken, visions of this age's end.
And, witnessing this himself, Ludlith decided to do something different. He decided to link the fire by himself without the other
You think it
lords of-
should say kin? But that's also what the game subtitle said. The game subtitle says ken as well. Which is kind of weird. Because I assumed the same thing. I thought it would have been kin as well.
For her ken, visions of this age's end.
And, witnessing this himself, Ludlith decided to do something different. He decided to link the fire by himself without the other Lords of Cinder to create some sort of chance, to create some sort of hope. The coiled sword fragment found in the Dark Firelink Shrine tells us bonfires are linked to one another irreversibly, retaining their affinity long after their purpose is exhausted, indicating the bonfire was indeed used in Firelink Shrine and possibly by Ludlith himself.
The eyes show a world destitute of fire, a barren plain of endless darkness, a place born of betrayal. So I willed myself Lord.
Dude, I can't imagine the difficulty in localizing these games from Miyazaki and the rest of his Japanese development team. It must be such a freaking task to be like, oh, all these characters are very Shakespearean in their delivery. How does that even work? Like, it's wild. They do English first? Really? Crazy. That's crazy.
Irreversibly, retaining their affinity long after their purpose is exhausted, indicating the bonfire was indeed used in Firelink Shrine and possibly by Ludlith himself.
The eyes show a world destitute of fire, a barren plain of endless darkness, a place born of betrayal. So I willed myself Lord to link the fire, to paint a new vision.
He continuously mentions himself as a little flame and will mention its importance.
A wee flame, belike, but I shoulder the world. Forgive me. Oh, please. I am not to blame.
Interestingly, the body the Soul of Cinders dragging during the intro looks like it could be Ludlith's. Either way, I believe him linking the fire as he wasn't kindling
Chinaruni, thank you for a full year of support. Chinaruni.
enough, created a sort of curse in the Firelink Shrine the Ashen rises from. It didn't save the world, but created enough light in Firelink Shrine for the bell to toll. And remember, bonfires are linked to one another irreversibly, retaining their affinity long after their purpose is exhausted.
He has the microphone in his throat. I am convinced of it.
By Ludlith himself.
The eyes show a world destitute of fire, a barren plain of endless darkness, a place born of betrayal. So I willed myself Lord to link the fire, to paint a new vision.
He is a
He
microphone.
continuously mentions himself as a little flame and will mention
You
its
little flame, you
importance.
little flame.
A wee flame, belike, but I shoulder the world. Forgive me. Oh, please. I am not to blame.
Interestingly, the body the Soul of Cinders dragging during the intro looks like it could be Ludlith's.
Aww.
Either way, I believe him linking the fire as he wasn't kindling enough, created a sort of curse in the Firelink Shrine the Ashen rises from. It didn't save the world, but created enough light in Firelink Shrine for the bell to toll. And remember, bonfires are linked to one another irreversibly, retaining their affinity long after their purpose is exhausted. If the Ashen were to use a bonfire in Firelink Shrine, it stands to reason that this bonfire would still be linked to all of its previous bonfires, and thus the Ashen is able to travel to a normal version of Lothric where the dark has begun to set in. This is also likely the reason it can be used to teleport to the location of the first flame.
That's cool. The
The
Unkindled.
Unkindled rises in what may very well be a small, alternate Firelink Shrine created by Ludlith linking the fire by himself. All of the Kingdom of Lothric is connected outside of this version of the Firelink Shrine. Meanwhile, any NPC who is found must teleport in order to reach the Unkindled's version of Firelink Shrine. It's also indicated multiple times that the Dark Firelink Shrine is actually in the past of Firelink Shrine the Unkindled rises from. Champion Gundar is bested by an unknown warrior, which causes him to become Udix Gundar, And this unknown warrior just so happens to be you, when you travel to Dark Firelink Shrine. Meanwhile, if you speak to the Shrine Handmaiden Dark Firelink Shrine first, before talking to her in your alternate Firelink Shrine, she'll have a new line of dialogue indicating she recognizes you from the past.
Oh.
Oh, thou art... Oh no, tisn't anything, Ashen One.
It's also interesting to note, gathered around the Ashen's grave in Dark Firelink Shrine are Corvians who are listening to a heretical storyteller who shares tales of the painted world to forlorn souls. Meanwhile, the Ashen Estus ring found there was left by Lothric's queen, who had it enshrined so that one day an unkindled might profit from its use. Perhaps the Corvians too are trying to influence the Ashen who would rise.
Head to the base of the high wall and seek the Lords of Cinder. Is this not the calling of your kind since ages past?
It seems the Ashen are cursed to forever rise and complete this cycle of returning the Lords of Cinder to the First Flame should they refuse.
Link the fire. For the Lords of Cinder.
Yes, whatever you say.
For the Ashen prisoners.
The Firekeeper refers to you as one of the Ashen prisoners, and it seems so too are all of the residents we find within Firelink Shrine, including the Firekeeper herself.
To skirt the curse's grasp. Tarry not for long. 'Tis dark for now, and not a soul stirs. But remember, fires are known to fade in quiet. Or perhaps thou'rt captive already, like the poor girl.
Aww.
But, as unkindled, you perform your duty, slaughtering both the former Lords of Cinder who refused, as well as Lothric, and bringing their ashes to Firelink Shrine. At this point, the unkindled and you as a player must decide which path you believe is the best to take in this dying world. You can choose the path of Gwyn, Frompt, Lothric, and the Lords of Cinder before you, to
Absolutely
link the
not.
fire and once more continue the Age of Fire and allow the cycle to continue. You can conspire with the Firekeeper to bring about the Age of Dark, and instead put out the flame, yet allow the Firekeeper to maintain some hope. Or, if you choose...
No! What? This is an option?
take away all hope. And finally, you can choose Koth, Londor, and the Dark Lord. You can take the flame for yourself and begin a new age for the Hollow.
Oh, so this is like the Age of Stars. Oh, that's sick. That's sick. How do you kill her? What would have been my option there to be like, sorry. I loved my ending. I think my ending was like the sweetest, most optimistic any of these games can be. Oh, you had to swing and hit her? Oh, no. Oh, that stinks.
Gracious Lord, make Londor whole.
Alright guys, that wraps up my Dark Souls 3 story video. I put a lot of work into this and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, I'd ask you to check out my
Great
Comedy
job.
Super Show series if you're down for a little fun.
Great job, Dave Control. I'm going to click like, and I'm going to comment for the algorithm. I'm going to say,
Let me know your thoughts in the comments
great
below.
video,
You
Dave.
can always check out the rest of my Dark Souls 3 lore series for aspects of the lore in more depth. Or
Just
catch up
knocked
with my
over
Dark
a
Souls 1 lore series.
little canister of
And I'll see you guys
medicine.
next time. Peace.
Bunch of Aleve and my Lexapro.
The wooden shield, which is fortunate, being
Great video, Dave.
bulletproof.
Cool. Okay, second video is Vati Vidya, who I'm sure you all know. It's spelled like this. So it's spelled, if you look in the chat down there, it's spelled like that. So you know Vati. If you don't, you should. Let's watch this one called Dark Souls 3, Lore of the Main Bosses. I'm going to like kind of cover myself up for a little bit just so you could see the name of the title or whatever. Dark Souls 3, Lore of the Main Bosses. I guess I could like make that bigger. Now let's just jump into it.
The stories of Souls games have always revolved around bosses, but that statement has never been more true than for Dark Souls 3. If you understand who you're killing in this game, then you will understand the story.
But we'll
The
get to
first
that
one in
later.
your way is Udex Gundyr, the Ashen Judge and scabbard to the coiled sword of the shrine. This sword is bequeathed only to chosen Ash who can best him in battle. But before he was the Ashen Judge, Gundyr walked through this place much like we did, on his way to meet his Firekeeper and link the fire. Charged with a duty and granted a cast iron halberd that would never crumble, Gundyr arrived, late, greeted by a shrine without fire and a bell that would not toll.
Damn.
The flame had already faded, and his Firekeeper had been thrown into the depths of the bell tower, grave of Firekeepers past. She never met.
He's just got such a great way of framing things. He's got such a good way of like storytelling. That's one thing I love about his Bloodborne videos. It's all about like, imagine you were walking down this thing. Your daughter's locked up back at home and you're scared for her, but you're going out to defend. Like, he's just super good at this shit. Chinaruni, thank you once again for your 12 months of support.
Gundyr arrived, late, greeted by a shrine without fire and a bell that would not toll. The flame had already faded, and his Firekeeper had been thrown into the depths of the bell tower, grave of Firekeepers past. She never met her champion, and the ensuing tragic farce became a favorite tale of the masses. And after he was bested by an unknown warrior, which is probably us, Gundyr the champion became sheathed to a coiled sword in the hopes that someday the first flame would be linked once more. Perhaps
That's cool.
Gundyr, with his unbreakable halberd, was fated to eternal service from the beginning. Since it's implied that Gundyr expected to meet a Firekeeper, he was likely meant as a candidate for linking the fire. Those capable of linking the fire are named Lords of Cinder.
Wait, brother, what? How did he parry this?
Likely meant as a candidate for
Oh, it's the buckler shield, or... Wait, is it? Or is that the dagger and the sword? I was expecting to see it. I straight up thought that he, like, stabbed and parried with the sword. I was like, bro, what?
It's implied that Gundyr expected to meet a Firekeeper. He was likely meant as a candidate for linking the fire. Those capable of linking the fire are named Lords of Cinder, beings capable of bringing back the world from the brink of darkness by linking the first flame. Indeed, the game speaks of 3 Lords of Cinder who have already linked the fire, and they're being resurrected as a last resort to link it once again. In the opening cutscene, you saw them. Aldrich...
They're basically like the Expendables. They're basically like the old action heroes that are like, we need one more Hollywood blockbuster hit. Come back. Come back, Stallone and Schwarzenegger, you know? Come back.
Saint of the Deep, Yorm the Giant, and Farron's Abyss Watchers. Each of these lords once had an age of their own, and the remnants of their age lives on in Dark Souls 3 and in their resurrection. For example, Aldrich is linked to these bosses and their stories, the Abyss Watchers are linked here, and those in Lothric are conjoined here. For simplicity's sake, we're going to discuss these stories in 3 chunks, starting with Aldrich, Pontiff Sullivan, Vort, and the Dancer, who all reside in the Boreal Valley.
Love it.
The Boreal Valley is currently ruled over by Pontiff Sullivan, a tyrant who sends his Outrider Knights to serve as his watchful eyes and his guards. And the first knight of Pontiff Sullivan we meet is Vort, an Outrider Knight who ambushes us as we attempt to leave Lothric. So the Outrider Knight's job is to keep an eye on things. Sullivan's knights are also described as his watchful eyes and his punitive blades. Each Outrider Knight is provided with a ring by the Pontiff, which transforms them into frenzied beasts and lures them into battles of death. Specifically, the 2 main Outrider Knights we see upon the high wall of Lothric appear...
By the way, I think Vort, obviously an early boss, you beat it, you keep playing the game for 60 hours, you kind of forget that Vort happened. But I think Vort is a really cool boss to kind of set the tone for for the speed of this game.
Provided with a ring by the pontiff, which transforms them into frenzied beasts and lures them into battles of death. Specifically, the two main Outrider Knights we see upon the high wall of Lothric appear at both points of progression in the area, so perhaps they serve as strategically placed guards in order to hinder our progression, and for Sullivan to keep an eye on the world. When you went through Irithyll, I'm sure you noticed those ghosts that seem to be walking the streets.
Yeah, they're awful.
Well, they likely represent the Outrider Knights before their departure and descent into madness, because two in particular are very interesting. They walk together, one man, one female, and the woman wears the mask of the dancer.
Oh.
Vort was never far from the fleeting dancer who watches over Emma in Lothric's Grand Cathedral. The dancer is far more intriguing than Vort is. The pontiff ordered her to serve as a dancer, and then he ordered her to serve as his Outrider Knight. He bestowed enchanted swords upon her, one dark and one...
That's so cool. Andy of the Boreal Valley. I'm going to name my firstborn that. Andres of the Boreal Valley Cortez.
Was never far from the fleeting dancer who watches over Emma in Lothric's Grand Cathedral. The dancer is far more intriguing than Vort is. The pontiff ordered her to...
Somehow watching this with best friends in your stream is 10 times better than my own. I love that, Wu-Tang. I love that. Welcome in. Thanks, Ant-Man. Appreciate you, brother.
The dancer is far more intriguing than Vort is. The pontiff ordered her to serve as a dancer, and then he ordered her to serve as his Outrider Knight. He bestowed enchanted swords upon her, one dark and one light,
so
mirroring
cool.
his own. Eventually, the black eyes of the pontiff transformed her into a beastly creature, her gauntlets fusing with her own hide. The fascinating thing about the dancer, though, is who she was before she became Sullivan's pet. It's a very popular theory that she is...
She looks like when she walks, you know how, like, people will always show birds and their head stays still even when you move the bird's body? I feel like she has really good, like, head stabilization. Like, her skull stabilization is really good. Pet is a very interesting word. I hate that very... Yeah, like an owl, yeah.
Black eyes of the pontiff transformed her into a beastly creature, her gauntlets fusing with her own hide. The fascinating thing about the dancer, though, is who she was before she became Sullivan's pet. It's a very popular theory that she is one of the 3 daughters of Guinevere who appear in-game. Here's the evidence. Her Aurora Veil is said to be an article of the Old Gods, which is permitted only for direct descendants of the old royal family. The dancer's soul can also be transposed to give you the spell Soothing Sunlight, miracle of Guinevere of the old royalty. Guinevere used to reside in Anor Londo, home of the gods, and her line continues in Lothric. So Guinevere was also revered as a goddess of fertility and bounty. She raised many heavenly children, and the dancer, having one of the 3 sunlight spells, is clearly one of them. And of course, as you know, Pontiff Sullivan, the tyrant, now rules over Irithyll and Anor Londo, so it's my belief that Sullivan gained power within Anor Londo, then proclaimed himself pontiff, and ordered Guinevere's daughter to serve as his dancer, and then Outrider Knight. The royal family was usurped and devoured and torn apart.
It's a really messed up relationship. This guy's a freak, man. This guy's a freak.
And Anor Londo, so it's my belief that Sullivan, as a goddess of fertility and bounty, she raised many heavenly children.
Yeah, this will be up on YouTube.
Having one of the 3 sunlight spells is clearly one of them. And of course,
and if you're watching right now, why don't you click like, subscribe, and comment for the algorithm? Thank you.
The tyrant now rules over Irithyll and Anor Londo, so it's my belief that Sullivan gained power within Anor Londo, then proclaimed himself pontiff, and ordered Guinevere's daughter to serve as his dancer, and then Outrider Knight.
Dude, men are trash, bro. Like, men are trash. You know what I mean?
The royal family was usurped and devoured and torn apart by Sullivan, who Yorshka says wrongfully proclaimed himself pontiff. Even after the family's passing, the Silver Knights looked over their manor and the ruined cathedral. The story behind Pontiff Sullivan's rise to power is told lightly, with only clues peeking above the surface, but in a nutshell, I believe Pontiff Sullivan took over Anor Londo from within, probably with the help.
Men literally want one thing and it's disgusting. And it's to turn Guinevere's daughter into into a dancer. Freak, what a freak.
Lightly, with only clues peeking above the surface, but in a nutshell, I believe Pontiff Sullivan took over Anor Londo from within, probably with the help of the Deacons of the Deep. The only ones in his way were the Dark Moon Knights. The story behind Pontiff Sullivan's rise to power is told lightly, with only clues peeking above the surface, but in a nutshell, I believe Pontiff Sullivan took over Anor Londo from within, probably with the help of the Deacons of the Deep. The only ones in his way were
These
the
guys
Dark
suck.
Moon Knights.
The Dark Moon Knights were once led by my elder brother, the Dark Sun Gwendolyn, but he was stricken by illness.
Gwendolyn
and
can go to
leadership
hell.
of the Knights fell to me. Then Sullivan wrongfully proclaimed himself pontiff and took me prisoner. Oh, where could my dear brother be?
So when I say that Pontiff Sullivan took over Anor Londo from within, it is speculation on my part, but my reasoning is that he knew of Gwendolyn, and he knew of Yorshka, and he wrongfully proclaimed himself pontiff, which all imply that he was a part of the system already. A pontiff
He just like
is
straight up
essentially
pulled
a
a Game of Thrones and just kind of like, I guess I'm pontiff now. And everybody's like, no, that's not how you gotta like. There's a set of rules, you know. You can't just do that.
Oh, where could my dear brother be?
So when I say that Pontiff Sullivan took over Anor Londo from within, it is speculation on my part, but my reasoning is that he knew of Gwendolyn, and he knew of Yorshka, and he wrongfully proclaimed himself pontiff, which all imply that he was a part of the system already. A pontiff is essentially a high priest, and the miracles, the weaponry, and the rings of the Dark Moon all rely
Shocker. A priest with a crooked freaking past. Shocker.
on pontiff, which all imply that he was a part of the system already. A pontiff is essentially a high priest, and the miracles, the weaponry, and the rings of the Dark Moon all rely on faith. Additionally, there's a bit more evidence that the pontiff was a part of the Dark Moon system already. The sword in his left hand is a ceremonial sword representing the judgment of the moon. However, its magic is far closer to sorcery than any existing lunar power. Its dark blue hues, deeper than the darkest moon, reflect Sorcerer Sullivan's true nature. Yorshka calls Sullivan a tyrant, which can mean someone who elects themselves ruler without legal right. This, along with his great sword of judgment that references the moon, furthers that idea that he took over from within, the figurehead of a movement that was abandoning their faith.
I heard that Sullivan asked Yorshka to suck on his tongue. Let's continue with the video.
Along with his great sword of judgment that references the moon, furthers that idea that he took over from within, the figurehead of a movement that was abandoning their faith in favor of Sullivan's true calling, dark sorceries. And the same sort of shift was happening amongst the Deacons of the Deep.
But we'll talk
who
about
we
that
find
later.
all throughout
Bro, I'm still like, I can't believe, I'm still blown away by that, bro. I'm still blown away by the Dalai Lama doing that.
dark sorceries. And the same sort of shift was happening amongst the Deacons of the Deep, who we find all throughout Anor Londo. Originally, though, they were a group of clergymen dedicated to sealing away the potential horrors of the deep. Deep protection tells us that the deep was originally a peaceful and sacred place, its deacons wearing dark red robes denoting their blessing of fire.
These guys are scary.
Over time, however,
Oh!
the deep became the final rest for many abhorrent things.
Remember when I wasn't scared by this dude at all? I was just like kind of expecting the worst and I got it. And the second time really scared me. Second time really scared me.
Tells us that the deep was originally a peaceful and sacred place, its deacons wearing dark red robes denoting their blessing of fire. Over time, however, the deep became the final rest for many abhorrent things, and indeed, human dregs were likely some of those things, as the dregs of humanity are said to sink to the lowest depths imaginable, forming the bedrock of the world. Those who linger too long on the brink of the deep will often slip, and lurking within the deep are insects which tear open the skin and burrow into flesh.
That's so cool.
Eventually, those dedicated to sealing away the horrors of the deep succumb to its...
That was letting intrusive thoughts win.
Those dedicated to sealing away the horrors of the deep succumb to its very power. An example of this is their Tome of Knowledge, which was originally intended to teach divine protection, but it had dark tales added to its pages, making it a thing most profane. And along with this descent, presumably, was Aldrich, Saint of the Deep.
A right and proper cleric, only he developed a habit of devouring men. He ate so many that he bloated like a drowned pig, then softened into sludge. So they stuck him in the Cathedral of the Deep, and they made him a Lord of Cinder, not for virtue, but for might.
I love this dude's line delivery. I love that line delivery. Not for virtue.
Lord of Cinder, not for virtue, but for might.
Aldrich was this simple saint who became a hugely powerful being, eventually chosen, maybe willingly and maybe not, to become a Lord of Cinder and link the fire. The deacon's skirt tells us that the deacons tended to the flame, and I'm perhaps inclined to believe that this meant that maybe they were tending to the flame of Aldrich when he was a Lord of Cinder. And whether this is true or not, we do know that the deacons eventually succumbed to the horrors of the deep, and neither tending to the flame nor the faith could save them. You would have noticed that many deacons cast Dark Soul sorceries, which were imparted to them by Archdeacon MacDonald, an adherent of Aldrich who was largely responsible for the corruption of the deacons. Archdeacon MacDonald delighted in the cathedral's stagnating souls. For him, they represented the glorious bedrock of this world. Under the guidance of Archdeacon MacDonald, these deacons became both clergymen and sorcerers. The Archdeacon's sin, as it's called, was to channel faith for sorcery, which transformed his staff from a symbol of religious authority into a catalyst of dark sorceries. The deacons, they still had faith, but it was not in fire any longer. It was in Aldrich.
Why am I getting so mad that this boss fight's taking so long? Melissa, go ahead and time yourself out for that one, Melissa.
Sin, as it's called, was to channel faith for sorcery, which transformed his staff from a symbol of religious authority into a catalyst of dark sorceries. The deacons, they still had faith, but it was not in fire any longer. It was in Aldrich, Saint of the Deep, their master. Upon his resurrection, Aldrich, like many Lords of Cinder, ruminated on the fading of the fire. For him, it inspired visions. He saw beyond the age of fire to the age of deep waters, and the coming age of the deep sea. Filled with new purpose, he knew what he had to do. He would devour the gods himself. When we get to the deacon...
Now we would devour the gods together. Fucking put that on the reel. I could easily have been that guy. What's his name? Big snake guy. Snake man.
Of the deep, we expect to build with new purpose. He knew what he had to do. He would devour the gods himself. When we get to the deacons of the deep, we expect to find Aldrich in his coffin, but he's already left for his home in the Boreal Valley.
What?
The deacons here...
Did you mean to keep that in there, Vadi? You mean to keep that shot in there, Vadi? What's that?
He knew what he had to do. He would devour the gods himself. When we get to the Deacons of the Deep, we expect to find Aldrich in his coffin, but he's already left for his home in the Boreal
No, I
Valley.
know it's a debug mod, but like, usually you like tick turn player off. You check that little like turn player visibility off.
Would devour the gods himself. When we get to the Deacons of the Deep, we expect to find Aldrich in his coffin, but he's already left for his home in the Boreal Valley. The deacons here are led by Archdeacon Royce, who is one of the 3 archdeacons who remained behind to keep eternal watch over his master's coffin, hoping that one day he would return. Aldrich left behind a small doll in his coffin that Pontiff Sullivan gave to his most valued subjects. Wherever you go, the moon sets in Irithyll. Wherever you may be, Irithyll is your home. When Aldrich left, Archdeacon MacDonald went with him. We come across MacDonald in the depths of Anor Londo.
Oh, that's
and
this
MacDonald,
dude.
like many other deacons, is obese.
I forgot
He's
about this
huge,
dude.
and I see that as a legacy of Aldrich, who derived power from...
Obese, he's huge. And this man is fat as fuck. Like, all right, body, Jesus. Chill out, bro. This game's pretty cool,
Aldrich
Kale.
left. Archdeacon MacDonald went with him. We come across MacDonald in the depths of Anor Londo, and MacDonald, like many other deacons, is obese. He's huge, and I see that as a legacy of Aldrich, who derived power from gluttony. They're clearly mimicking him. In Anor Londo, Archdeacon MacDonald came to lead the Aldrich faithful, who are defenders, who exist to ensure that Aldrich, devourer of gods, remains undisturbed. And when we come across Aldrich, we realize why he wants to be undisturbed. Because Pontiff Sullivan, with a devourer of gods by his side, has imprisoned a god of the old royalty in the abandoned cathedral to be fed to the devourer. Gwyndolin, son of Gwyn and prior leader of the Darkmoon Knights, was gradually devoured by Aldrich.
Oh,
As Aldrich
good.
slowly devoured the god,
good, chat, good. Stupid ass boss fight, Gwyndolin.
he wants to be undisturbed, because Pontiff Sullivan, with a devourer of gods by his side, has imprisoned a god of the old royalty in the abandoned cathedral to be fed to the devourer. Gwyndolin, son of Gwyn and prior leader of the Darkmoon Knights, was
bested me, I
gradually
know.
devoured by Aldrich. As Aldrich slowly devoured the god of the Dark Moon, he dreamt. In this dream, he saw the form of a young, pale girl in hiding, and we know this is Yorshka, who was sister to Gwyndolin, and a half-breed who is parallel to Priscilla from Dark Souls 1. But the interesting thing about this is the dream that Aldrich had, because apparently Aldrich only needs to dream about someone to learn their skills.
Whoa.
For he uses Priscilla's life hunt scythe in battle. And this fact that
That's
he can
cool.
learn things through his visions has some interesting
Neo.
implications, because Aldrich is clearly wielding a Gravelord greatsword upon the end of his spear, which lends credit towards this theory that Aldrich has devoured Nitro. in
Oh,
some
shit,
capacity,
that's awesome.
And he is called the Devourer of Gods, plural, after all. So
That's
another question
awesome.
becomes, did Aldrich also devour Nitro? Well, he has the wispy Nito-like cloak with skulls within it, but
Nito.
I think it's more likely that these skulls are just remnants of other humans that he's devoured. You have to remember there is no concrete evidence that he has devoured Nito, and I personally think it's more likely that he simply dreamt up the Gravelord spell in a similar manner to which he dreamt up the Life Hunt scythe from Yorshka. But what you think shapes the story here, so let me know. So, that's all of the Pontiff's lackeys explained for the most part, and the biggest unanswered questions here to go into in other videos is what exactly the relationship between Sullivan and the deacons is, and in what order this story of corruption and treachery played out, because timeline is always one of the hardest things to get right in the Soul series. But the biggest curiosity, in my opinion, and the one that really interests me, are Aldrich's visions of the Age of the Deep Sea. From a being, remember, that has visions so accurate he can learn spells from those visions. So, in a franchise that's entirely self-contained within this Age of Fire and its cycles, this vision of the deep sea, it's pretty much the
Chat, I hated these dudes.
entirely
I hated these
self-contained within
dudes.
this Age of Fire and
These dudes? Oh, I hated them. Scary. Scary.
its cycles. This vision of the deep sea, it's pretty much the only mention of a different future, and its appearance in these descriptions feels so out of place that I almost expect it to be referenced in the future in some capacity. Assuming it's not just a reference to Bloodborne, maybe this indicates what Miyazaki is doing next on one of his projects, or maybe we'll see something related to this in the DLC. Moving on. Something set Sullivan down this path. When Sullivan was a young sorcerer, he discovered the profaned capital, and down there he discovered an unfading flame below a distant tundra of Irithyll, and when he found this, a burning ambition took root within him. The profaned flame. The origins of it aren't known, but we do know a few things. We know it's an unfading flame, we know that it can be manipulated, and we know that it swallows the hearts of those who wield it. The pontiff himself imbued his greatsword with this fire, and he also gave it to his holy knights.
We should just use it as like an unlimited power source, chat. I'm gonna put a suit around the world. Like if you give that to Tony Stark, he's gonna fuck it up somehow. He's gonna destroy the world somehow. But like it'd be really cool as like a, hey man, we don't need firewood. It's just gonna keep on burning, you know?
Himself imbued his greatsword with this fire, and he also gave it to be manipulated, and we know that it swallows the hearts of those who wield it. The pontiff himself imbued his greatsword with this fire, and he also gave it to his holy knights. Shortly after he did this, the fire witches had their hearts swallowed by the flame. And as one last example of its corrupting influence, the handmaidens who wield it down in the profaned capital, their dagger says that they take pleasure in wounding others, and
Freaks.
Of course the pontiff himself doesn't exactly have a very good moral compass. But apart from that, we know precious little about the profaned flame, and this has been the hardest part of the script to write for me, because the profaned flame defies all categorization as flames that have existed previously in the series. So I'm going to work on my theories on it, and while I'm doing that I'll list those theories in the description, because I could talk about this thing for a very long time without actually getting anywhere. But the final thing, and maybe the most important thing we know about the profaned flame, is that Yorm the Giant became a Lord of Cinder to put it to rest. Now, clearly, Yorm was not successful, because the profaned flame has infiltrated almost all of Irithyll and set a lot of events in motion. This just adds even more tragedy to Yorm's tale. Yorm is the descendant of an ancient conqueror, and was asked by the very people once subjugated to lead them, serving as both a weighty blade and a stone-hard shield. Yorm fought unflinchingly as a one-man vanguard, but one day he lost the one he wished to protect.
Yorm's cool, man.
In response, he threw down his great shield and added a left-handed notch to his machete instead, so he could two-hand it, for he no longer had anything left to protect. All the while, his human subjects appeared quite disrespectful of him.
So the writers for this game confirmed all of this, or was it more like we didn't think of any of this, we just thought it looked cool? No, like this isn't just people guessing stuff. It's people reading every item description and linking it to where it belongs.
Fought unflinchingly as a
Like the descriptions are very crafted in a way that helps you fill in the blanks. Yeah, this is all lore, yeah. These aren't just player interpretations. I'd say like maybe 1% of it is player interpretations. But for the most part, it's all there, yeah.
descendant of an ancient conqueror, and was asked by the very people once subjugated to lead them, serving as both a weighty blade and a stone-hard shield. Yorm fought unflinchingly as a one-man vanguard, but one day he lost the one he wished to protect.
The source of
In
the info is
response,
blocked by the captions. Yeah, it's not
he threw
good though.
down his great shield and added a left-handed notch to his machete instead, so he could two-hand it, for he no longer had anything left to protect. All the while, his human subjects appeared quite disrespectful of him. They were insincere when they called him a lord, and they doubted him. He is called Lonely Yorm in his cinders, and perhaps that's because he lost the one he wished to protect, or perhaps because he didn't have the love of his people. At some point, the profaned flame became a real problem in the capital, for according to his cinders, Yorm decided to sacrifice himself and become a Lord of Cinder to put the profaned flame to rest. I don't know why Yorm decided that, hey, I'm gonna put out fire with fire, because when he did this, fire rained down from the sky and incinerated naught but human flesh. This is an interesting insight into who the linking of the fire consumes. It consumed humans, and humans alone, and you see their disfigured, smelted corpses all around Yorm's chamber. Before he linked the fire, however, Yorm left behind 2 Storm Rulers, which was a legendary greatsword, also known as the Giant Slayer, for the residual strength of storm that brings giants to their knees. So this thing could kill giants, and one he gave to the humans who doubted him. He called them out on their cowardly words and gave them a weapon capable of killing
That's
him.
awesome.
And the other Storm Ruler he gave to a dear friend in return for a promise.
Oh.
This dear friend was Sigurd, who journeys to the profaned capital in order to uphold his promise and slay his old friend.
Oh.
Presumably, Yorm asked Sigurd to kill him if he ever betrayed his duty, and Sigurd does so, seeing that Yorm has not returned to link the fire once again.
Jesus, so cool.
The profaned capital also had its sorcerers, who claimed heirship to the legacy of the renowned scholar Big Hat Logan, even going so far as to emulate the type of staff he used. But halfway across the world, I know of 2 crystal sages who emulated him even more closely. These crystal sages served as spiritual guides to the scholars of Lothric's Grand Archives, and one of them went on to ally with the Undead Legion.
I remember you.
The Undead Legion of Farron was a caravan of undead, dedicated to the eradication of the Abyss wherever it was found. The Abyss Watchers, as they were called, follow the duty and the form of the Wolf Knight of Dark Souls 1, known as Artorias the Abyss Walker. They are essentially his legacy. They made their home in Farron Keep, and high above Farron Keep lies an emaciated old wolf. The Abyss Watchers, for their hunting of the Abyss, they required some...
Kind of straight up forgot this wolf was here. I just wanted to get the hell out of this goddamn swamp. I forgot that this dude was even here chilling. Talked to him once, never saw him again.
They are essentially his legacy. They made their home in Farron Keep, and high above Farron Keep lies an emaciated old wolf. The Abyss Watchers, for their hunting of the Abyss, they required some art that went beyond any existing art. Wolf's Blood, the legacy of Artorias, provided just that. Their pointed steel helm became shirked as this sinister omen by the masses, because, think about it, if you saw that pointed steel helmet coming towards your kingdom, you knew you were in trouble, because these guys are dedicated to taking out the Abyss. And indeed, their home in Farron might just be set above such a kingdom.
That's awesome.
For below are the catacombs of Carthus,
oh, God.
and sealed within a goblet, deep below in the catacombs, is the encounter with High Lord Wolnir, a ruler who succumbed to the Abyss. Before succumbing to the Abyss, Wolnir was a conqueror. He ruled over the people of Carthus of the Sands, formidable warriors who were masters of the curved sword, and also of pyromancies that enhanced the effectiveness of their curved swords. The swordsmen attached great value to victory at all costs, for where was the honor?
Now, streamer Andy Cortez explored this place at around 2 in the morning and was very frustrated with his experience. But we'll get to that later.
In death. They lived for their High Lord Wolnir, who was conqueror of most lands known to their people, and yeah, you can see why they loved him. In Wolnir's time, there were other lords who had their crowns rightfully bequeathed upon them, but Wolnir brought them to their knees and ground their crowns to dust, forming his own crown from theirs, for he was the one High Lord, keen to outlive all others. Reminds me a lot of what we did in Dark Souls 2. Anyway, somehow, Wolnir himself fell to the abyss.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
From theirs, for he was the one High Lord who was conqueror of most lands known to their people, and yeah, you can see why they loved him. In Wolnir's time, there were other lords who had their crowns rightfully bequeathed upon them, but Wolnir brought them to their knees and ground their crowns to dust, forming his own crown from theirs, for he was the one High Lord, keen to outlive all others. Reminds me a lot of what we did in Dark Souls 2. Anyway, somehow Wolnir himself fell to the abyss, and he was gripped by this fear of true darkness, and he pleaded to the gods for the first time. In our boss fight with him, there is a darkness below Wolnir.
You just get like desperate in that moment. Like you could be the most like atheist person ever, and you're falling out of a plane. You're like, please, if there is anything out there, that's Wolnir right now.
This time. In our boss fight with him, there is a darkness below Wolnir, and it's struggling to consume him.
Thanks, Cameron.
But Wolnir had his holy sword, and he had 3 armlets which he had stripped from the corpses of clerics, and these things gave him some semblance of comfort. Of course, we destroy the bracelets,
cool sword.
And the abyss finally consumes him. While he was in the abyss, however,
I never saw the sword, no.
was not inactive. Black Serpent is this pyromancy that was discovered from the abyss by Wolnir, which went on to inspire the black arts of his Grave Wardens. The Grave Warden Pyromancy Tome was developed by his Grave Wardens who discovered his pyromancies. And going back up for a second, Wolnir and the Abyss, their proximity to the Abyss Watchers probably isn't coincidence. In fact, it makes quite a lot of sense for Carthus to be one of the kingdoms that the Abyss Watchers toppled.
Ah.
So let's go back up to the Abyss Watchers for a second and see if this theory holds any weight. Eventually, the Abyss Watchers became Lords of Cinder. Their shed wolf's blood served their mandate as lords. Essentially, it met the requirements. To gain access to the Abyss Watchers, you have to extinguish 3 flames, and I always wondered why this ritual existed. It felt very video gamey and out of place, but I went through once more recently and I looked really closely at the engravings behind each flame. One looks like the 4 kings, one looks like Nitro, and one looks like the Bed of Chaos, 3 of the main lords in Dark Souls 1.
Oh.
And these were the souls you had to collect to gain access to Gwyn and open a giant stone door. So these are likely here to symbolize that, right? We're extinguishing 3 flames and we're opening the door that explains the ritual. Anyway, that's more a piece of trivia than anything. After
You're right,
the
Jason.
Legion's Watchers became Lords of Cinder, the wolf blood dried up, and Farron was consumed by a festering wood. Dark wraiths began to roam, the keep fell to ruins, and, as suggested by many of you in my lore through, the Abyss Watchers, upon being resurrected to link the fire once more, may have been affected by the Abyss as well. So, here's the theory. The Abyss Watchers were driven to seek out the Abyss, right?
Right.
Well, what if, upon their resurrection, the Abyss far below in the catacombs of Carthus crept into the Abyss Watchers themselves? This would explain why the Abyss Watchers are locked into endless combat with themselves, because they're driven to seek out the Abyss, but they also can't die, so they're locked into endless combat. When I read this theory in the comments, something else clicked as well.
In the comments.
The Wolf Knight armor, which belonged to Artorias, who fell to the Abyss, says that the armor of the Abyss Watchers suggests their own eventual end. So the game is drawing a parallel here between Artorias and the Abyss Watchers. It's saying that the armor of the Abyss Watchers shows that they're falling to the Abyss as well. And here's the really interesting thing. When you look closely at their armor, you realize it has black tendrils of the Abyss rising up.
Oh, cool.
So the armor is showing us that they fell to the Abyss. Probably. This theory isn't concrete, and no one should take it as such, but I think it's the
I'm
best
taking it as
explanation
such.
for their infighting. It's my favorite explanation, anyway. And mostly, this one was all you guys, so
Abyss
thank you.
gummies.
Onwards to Lothric. The Knights of Lothric were hunters of dragons,
Later,
explaining
Nuggies.
their affinity with lightning and why they worshipped the sun. They have since tamed dragons, and with their drakes, they once crushed anything that threatened their
Later,
shores.
Mind Goblin.
Were hunters of dragons. Mostly, this one was all you guys, so thank you. Onwards to Lothric. The Knights of Lothric were hunters of dragons, explaining their affinity with lightning and why they worshipped the sun. They have since tamed dragons, and with their drakes, they once crushed anything that threatened their shores. The knight has served as one of the 3 pillars of Lothric since ancient times, and it shares place alongside the wyverns as a symbol of Lothric. However, tales of dragon slayers are now a rare thing, and they're told only in fragments and whispers in remote regions. The Dragon Slayer armor lost its master long ago, but it still remembers the sporting hunts they shared together. When we fight against it, the armor retains its master's fighting style, but now it has a new master, the Pilgrim Butterfly.
God, they're
Now,
so gross.
the soul of the Dragon Slayer armor is the only mention of these butterfly creatures, so speculation abounds whenever you talk about them. When you look up at them closely, though, closer than the game intends you to ever get, you'll see that they're flesh and bone, and they're almost bent backwards with a ribcage jutting outwards. Now, their name is one of the biggest clues that we have, and the word pilgrim makes me think of the pilgrims of Londor, who all died on their way to the peak of
Makes
Lothric.
sense.
And just like these pilgrim butterflies fly upwards to the peak of Lothric as well. And in both these cases, with the pilgrims and the pilgrim butterflies, we have no real idea why either of them are going up. So perhaps we'll learn more if we ever get Londor-themed DLC, and I think that's pretty likely. I'm going to list 2 other theories in the description about the butterflies, because the bottom line is we don't know what they are. Next is the Archives, and beyond the Archives is Prince Lothric and his brother, Lorien. Curiously,
The Archives
these are the
sucked,
only
man.
Lords of Cinder who were not featured in the opening cutscene of Lords being resurrected, and I believe that's because they never linked the fire. And I think their rejection of linking the fire might have been what set all of the desperate resurrections into motion. This is just a theory, but I think it's backed up by most of these descriptions and this dialogue.
Prince Lothric is in your hands. Please save his soul. Tell him what he must be, a lord.
So, there's Prince Lothric and Lorien, his brother. Lorien is the eldest, and before he was crippled, he was a knight who single-handedly slayed a demon prince, the victory eternally scorching his sword with flame. The Cinders of a Lord state that the Lothric bloodline was obsessed with creating a worthy heir. They needed someone to link the flame, and for some reason Prince...
It's one of your faves? No, I just mean like the enemies in it, the freaking... all of the mages shooting stuff at you. The ghost hands with the like, oh, just all of it was just horrifying and just unpleasant to be around.
Curiously, these are the only Lords of Cinder who were not featured in the opening cutscene of Lords being resurrected, and I believe that's because they never linked the fire. And I think their rejection of linking the fire might have been what set all of the desperate resurrections into motion. This is just a theory, but I think it's backed up by most of these descriptions and this dialogue.
Prince Lothric is in your hands.
He's your problem now.
Please save his soul. Tell him what he must be, a lord.
So, there's Prince Lothric and Lorien, his brother. Lorien is the eldest, and before he was crippled, he was a knight who single-handedly slayed a demon prince, the victory eternally scorching his sword with flame. The Cinders of a
Is it like the Demon Prince in the DLC? Oh, that's cool.
and before he was crippled, he was a knight who single-handedly slayed a demon prince, the victory eternally scorching his sword with flame. The Cinders of a Lord state that the Lothric bloodline was obsessed with creating a worthy heir. They needed someone to link the flame, and for some reason Prince Lorien did not suffice. So they put their faith in their next born, Prince Lothric, as his throne states, last hope of his line.
That's cool.
Prince Lothric, destined to be a Lord of Cinder, was born into swaddling clothes used in ancient prayer, and they are all that he has ever worn. He was cherished by the royal family, despite being born into illness, a frail and shriveled child. He was their last hope, and meant to be a champion, but some things will remain distant dreams forever. Linking the fire proved impossible, so the family resorted to unspeakable means. Descriptions don't say or imply what these unspeakable means are.
They did heroin.
So that's up to us to guess at. But after mentioning these unspeakable means, the Cinder description goes on to say that the path to linking the fire is a cursed one indeed. So Prince Lothric was cursed. With what, we don't know, but Lorien embraced his brother's curse, leaving him mute and crippled. It is said that Lorien, the one who embraced the curse, did so willingly and embraced his fate. When we kill Lorien in the boss fight, Lothric resurrects him, saying, "For that is our curse." So maybe being unable to die itself is the fire-linking curse, and why he says,
You remain among the accursed.
After becoming one, the soul of the twin princes says that they rejected their duty to become lords of Cinder and settled down far, far away to watch the fire fade from a distance. The curse has made their souls nearly inseparable. So why did Lothric grow to despise and reject his duty as a lord of Cinder? Well, it's very likely due to a man named as the First of the Scholars. Soulstream says that he was alleged to be a private mentor of the royal prince, and that he doubted the linking of the fire. So it's very likely that this scholar was the one who made Lothric reject his fate as a Lord of Cinder. And there is so much more to the tale of Lothric, but we don't have time.
But we'll
I want
get
to
to
talk
that
about
later.
the kingdom, about the royal family, but this video is only about the main bosses, so I still have to mention Osiris, King of Lothric, and his wife, the Queen, so please subscribe and look out for the optional bosses lore video. And the final main boss, the being we fight after the Firekeeper chastises the lords for going without thrones, is the soul of Cinder itself, located within the kiln of the first flame. The soul of Cinder is actually a fairly easy being to explain. Ever since Lord Gwyn, the first Lord of Cinder, many exalted lords have linked the first flame, and it is their very souls that have manifested themselves as defender.
That's so awesome.
The soul of Cinder
That is
is
so
their
awesome.
deific manifestation. More specifically, it's clear that the soul of Cinder is this conglomerate of players themselves, us from previous games and cycles who have linked the fire. Using the ninja flip ring from Dark Souls 1, curved swords,
Oh yeah, the
pyromancies,
flip.
sorceries, miracles, and in Phase 2, the music shifts to this twisted tribute of Gwyn's theme as he takes on the First Lord's fighting style. The kiln also, it represents the state of the world if you look behind you. It's a city twisted and distorted and folded in on itself, just like the entire game and bosses we just journeyed through. Dark Souls 3 contains the histories, the people, and the lands of the Abyss Watcher's age, of the Pontiff and Aldrich's age, of Yorm's age, and the story of Lothric that literally seems to have called forth old lords of Cinder to link the fire once again. And as you stand in front of the flame, 4 choices lay before you, more than any previous game. But that's a video and a story for another time.
We'll get to that
for this
later.
video is far, far too long already, and judging by my analytics for videos like this, only half of the people who started watching this video will still be watching now, so
Times sure have changed, huh? Now Vadi's making fucking 4-hour-long video. Movie style cinematics. That's wild. Anyway, this video is called Dark Souls 3 Lore of the Main Bosses.
So, to you guys, thank you for sticking it through. This video took a really long time to make. And the major shout out in this video has to go to a guy who runs a YouTube channel named AGR Cactus. He taught me how to use a lot of these camera tricks, and this video would not look half as good.
Great job, AGR Cactus. I'm going to click like on this bad boy. And I'm going to say, great video, Vadi. Because we always comment for the algorithm, gamers. We always comment for the algorithm. This is Dark Souls 3 Lore of the Optional Bosses, another video by Vati Video. And let's just jump into it.
Lord Gwyn's firstborn son was a god of war, who inherited the sunlight from his father. The power of sunlight is...
Gotta run that back real quick, sorry chat. Alright, here we go.
Lord Gwyn's firstborn son was a god of war, who inherited the sunlight from his father. The power of sunlight is manifest as lightning, and it's highly effective against dragons. And Gwyn's firstborn son was once a dragon slayer who fought against his father's ancient enemy. And as you know, the ancient dragons once ruled over an age of grey, but Gwyn discovered their weakness and he struck them down with great bolts of lightning. Later, advancements in arms would lead to lightning-imbued spears with a cross pommel, which were developed to be stamped or thrust deep into the flesh.
Remember how I nailed this boss fight the first try?
The Firstborn's Dragon Slayer sword spear was the first of such weapons, for the Firstborn had respect only for arms and nothing else. At some point during the war, however, Gwyn's Firstborn had a change of heart. He switched sides and sacrificed everything to ally himself with the ancient dragons. And unlike a lot of Souls lore, this part of history is actually described as missing for a reason, for after he sided with the ancient dragons, Lord Gwyn's Firstborn was expunged from the annals of history.
Damn,
and
they're straight up like, wow. Very reminiscent of what's happening today.
deific status is actually described as missing for a reason.
Did these games start as books? No, it's all Miyazaki being a wild man
with the ancient dragons. And unlike a lot,
Miyazaki being a big fan of Berserk and other sort of like cosmic horror stuff, H.P. Lovecraft and fantasy novels and stuff like that.
Of Souls lore, this part of history is actually described as missing for a reason, for after he sided with the ancient dragons, Lord Gwyn's Firstborn was expunged from the annals of history, and his deific status was rescinded. He was no longer considered a god, no longer in the books of history, and
this
today,
was cool as hell, dude. I remember this part. This was awesome. That's where his statue should be, chat.
He was no longer considered a god, no longer in the books of history, and today even his name is not known. If you played around the time that Dark Souls 1 was released, the identity of the Firstborn was a complete mystery to all of us. All we knew was that he was Gwyn's Firstborn, that he was a god of war, and that he was a core part of the Warriors of Sunlight.
That's awesome.
So players puzzled over missing statues next to Gwyn, they puzzled over broken monuments to the Warriors of Sunlight, and we even guessed that the Firstborn himself could have just been a simple man from Astora who fought for the sun. And it is true that the god of war continued to watch over his Sunlight warriors, but we can now finally see where he went and why. The Nameless King, firstborn son of Gwyn, heir of Sunlight and god of war, left the miracle Sunlight blade upon his father's coffin, perhaps as a final farewell. Now, this part of the Nameless King's history, it's been purposefully erased, but some players do think that traces of his existence still remain out in the world and cannot be erased. In fact, it's a popular theory, and I'll leave a link to a few sources in the description, that the Nameless King is referenced in the Faram armor set, which is this plate set that was named after a god of war. The mighty lion knights of Ferosa, worshippers of the war god Faram, wore heavy armor and were feared for their two-handed swordplay. This armor was blessed by the war god Faram. Ferosa would later fall to conflict with their neighbors, and the legacy of the Faram knights fell with it, so the information here is also lacking. But is the Nameless King the war god Faram? Well, that's up to you to decide. Both are described as war gods, both place high value in arms. The Nameless King had to be king of some realm, and the Faram set is blessed and named after a god of war, who is possibly the one emblazoned upon the helm as a knight facing a dragon. Also, both the Nameless King and the kingdom of Ferosa fell from power, so hey, whatever you believe,
that's crazy,
this is a
dude.
example of Souls leaving just enough clues that you can choose to believe or not choose to believe.
I love
so
that, Chubb.
No one is provably right or wrong here. But moving on to what we do know, the Nameless King tamed a storm drake, upon which...
Chat, you need to understand, like, in a lot of fantasy games, when you're making 3D props, you're just like, it'd be cool to put a little, like, maybe a dragon and fighting a dude on a helmet, whatever. Like, it just seems like a cool thing to do. There's the fact that, like, everything in these games have purpose is just wild to me.
No one is provably right or wrong here. But moving on to what we do know, the Nameless King tamed a storm drake, upon which he led a lifetime of battle. Assumedly, this partnership with the storm drake was a part of the Firstborn allying with the ancient dragons. I have a few suspicions that the storm drake might also be known as a giant horned Oni, which are found in eastern lands, as the Oni Slayer Great Arrow describes. And it's the only creature in the game...
I would, Creed, that's a great point. I would love to ask him and his team, like, give me a top 10 list of things that you've done that players have not noticed yet. Just little lore bits here and there. I think that'd be insane.
Are found in eastern lands, as the Oni Slayer would be known as a lifetime of battle. Assumedly, this partnership with the storm drake was a part of the Firstborn allying with the ancient dragons. I have a few suspicions that the storm drake might also be known as a giant horned Oni, which are found in eastern lands, as the Oni Slayer Great Arrow describes. And it's the only creature in the game that really fits the description of an Oni, whatever creature that is, and it's certainly a drake that looks very much like a foreign offshoot of most other draconid creatures in Souls.
Yeah, it's ugly as hell.
Like them, really. Oni
like a
are
bird,
also
it's a big
found
chicken.
in an eastern land, and Ferosa is in an eastern land as well, so maybe there's something here, but just speculation. When the storm drake fell, the king claimed its soul, as was customary in the Age of the Gods. In a giant flash, we see the Nameless King become imbued with the drake's power of the storm, which is really reminiscent of Ornstein and Smo, absorbing one another in their boss fight in Dark Souls 1, as the Age of the Gods was drawing to a close there. Dark Souls 3's description of Smo's great hammer tells us that Smo was the last knight to remain at his post, guarding the ruined cathedral.
He's just like me, for real, dude. He's just like me. Big belly, big old titties hanging out. That's me, bro.
Cathedral. Ornstein, on the other hand, he long guarded the ruined cathedral, but he left the land in search of the Nameless King. So you're probably asking yourself, how did Ornstein leave the cathedral if I killed him in Dark Souls 1 and then again in Dark Souls 2?
Yeah.
Well, remember,
what? He's in Dark Souls 2, bro. Spoilers. Come on, buddy.
Dark Souls 1 and then again in Dark Souls 2. Well, remember, Dark Souls 3 is the game that very openly references the fact that events are doomed to repeat themselves, more than any previous game.
Spoilers, chat. Come on, bro. Vadi, you should have edited this out. Delete this and re-upload it, please. Thank you.
References the fact that events are doomed to repeat themselves, more than any previous game. This is a game about cycles, and the Lords of Cinder who contributed to their own cycle. We see so many cycles laid before us, so yes, a lot of narratives and plots in the game have been recycled in a way that's what...
But I didn't read the Dark Souls command chat. Just played Dark Souls 2 already. Nate Sticker, I just finished 3, bro. I just finished it, okay? That's my gift to you for the next 5 years. And you'll be happy with it, okay? Cherish that. Time out the lore vid.
So many cycles laid before us, so yes, a lot of narratives and plots in the game have been recycled in a way that's what the games are about. But in Dark Souls 3, it's nice because a lot of these plots are further along than ever before. Take Ornstein, for example. In this timeline, he survived until he tired of standing around in a cathedral, and he left. For during this dragonless age where he stood in the cathedral, Ornstein the Dragon Slayer must have felt quite bereft of purpose, so he left in search of the Nameless King. So the question becomes, did he intend to kill the Nameless King, or did he intend to serve him? Ornstein's set in Dark Souls 1 describes Ornstein as the captain of the 4 Knights of Lord Gwyn, but the Leo Ring of Dark Souls 3 describes him as the first knight of the Sun's eldest born, the Nameless King. So, since I find it hard to believe that he could be both the captain of the guard to Gwyn and simultaneously the first knight of the Firstborn, I think it's most likely that Ornstein abandoned his duty as captain of the guard and then decided to serve the Nameless King instead.
He straight up pulled a Succession, dude. He pulled a Succession move. Tom Wamsgans. He made a play. He made a call.
After he was exiled. But the best evidence that Ornstein remained a friend to the Nameless King is the Sacred Oath description, which...
Should have played them in order if you didn't want spoilers. Nate Sticker, I'm joking around, bro, okay? You should if you've watched me enough, you know that nothing I say is serious, okay? Just chill out.
labels him as not just the Nameless King's first knight, but his faithful
Succession's so good, dude.
Since the game is clarifying something like this, then I'm going to believe that he is loyal to the Nameless King. So Ornstein tracks down and pledges allegiance to the Nameless King. But what becomes of Ornstein after his arrival in Archdragon Peak? We find his armor and his weapon after the Nameless King
just
fight,
retires.
but it's just discarded to the side. It's not upon a corpse, it's not in a chest, and this is strange for Souls, right? It stands out. I don't think there's many examples of this happening.
He just...
so sure, it wouldn't make...
he just left his old life behind. He just fucking threw his weapon and was like, I'm done with it. I'm tired, bro, you know? Enough. Let me go sit in a couch somewhere. I'm watching the NBA playoffs.
Makes sense for the armor to be upon a corpse, but items like this are at least meant to be in chests.
It's like when you hear, like, I always see tweets from girls on like Twitter and stuff being like, nothing better than getting home, taking your bra off, and just fucking relaxing. Like, that's kind of what I imagine this to be. I was like, oh, fuck, man, enough. Tired, dude. Take off my fucking bra and just take my stupid sword and my helmet, you know? Who are you following? I have a lot of friends who say that. I've had a lot of friends who tweet that shit or put on Instagram, you know?
So, to me, it signifies that Ornstein didn't want to preserve anything at all from his past, or perhaps that he discarded his armor in the same way that many people here do, to begin the transformation into a dragon. So,
and that's what a lot of girls do too. They transform into dragons. It's exactly what they do. This is crazy lore.
He discarded his armor in the same way that many people here do, to begin the transformation into a dragon. So, is Ornstein alive? Is he dead? Was he killed by the Nameless King? or did he become one of the dragons in the shrine? His fate is left open for you to decide. So we've mentioned the spell Sacred Oath before, and its description reads, Sacred Oath, a miracle devised by warriors of the sun, tells the tale of the sun's firstborn, his faithful first knight, and the brave dragon slayer who served them both. The brave dragon slayer who served them both. So a few dragon slayers could fit this description, but I think it's most likely that this was Havel. Havel the Rock was a battlefield compatriot of Gwyn, the First Lord. He was suited in this armor, carved from solid rock, and he wields the tooth of an everlasting dragon. Havel was followed by warriors who replicated his armaments and his weaponry and never flinched nor retreated from battle. Havel was the arch-enemy of Seath, the Scaleless, which was the dragon who betrayed his...
Havel is who Dylan Brooks wants to be. Take that and do with it whatever you want.
Open for you to decide. So we've mentioned the spell Sacred Oath before, and its description reads, Sacred Oath, a miracle devised by warriors of the sun, tells the tale of the sun's firstborn, his faithful first knight, and the brave dragon slayer who served them both.
Melissa.
The brave dragon slayer who served them both. So a few dragon slayers could fit this description, but I think it's most likely that this was Havel. Havel the Rock was a battlefield compatriot of Gwyn, the First Lord. He was suited in this armor, carved from solid rock, and he wields the tooth of an everlasting dragon. Havel was followed by warriors who replicated his armaments and his weaponry.
Everybody tweeted Dylan Brooks, you fucking wish you were Havel the Rock. Dylan Brooks is like, I don't back down from any challenge. I don't care if you're the king. I don't care if you're Steph. I don't care who you are. But Havel's actually him. Havel is him.
Rock was a battlefield compatriot of Gwyn, the First Lord. He was suited in this armor, carved from solid rock, and he wields the tooth of an everlasting dragon. Havel was followed by warriors who replicated his armaments and his weaponry and never flinched nor retreated from battle. Havel was the arch-enemy of Seath, the Scaleless, which was the dragon who betrayed his own and allied with Lord Gwyn. This must have placed Havel in an awkward spot. He's a battlefield compatriot of Lord Gwyn, and yet Gwyn allied with a magic-wielding, traitorous dragon that Havel hates. In Dark Souls 1, it's implied that Havel was locked away by a dear friend, and all that time ago, we theorized that it was Gwyn himself who locked his hollowed friend away. We also talked about how a piece of occult weaponry was capable of killing the gods, and it was locked away in a basement with the rest of Havel's gear, and this fueled some theory that Havel plotted against the gods. In Lordran, Havel remained locked in that...
Okay, for real? I know we want Bloodborne 60 frames, but just seeing this, it's like, man, I would love to play a Dark Souls 1 remake. I would love to watch a Dark Souls... I would love to play a Dark Souls 1 remake. That would be incredible. Blue Point just popping off with their light. Chad, how is Demon Souls Remake still the best looking game? Yeah, beyond the remastered, like top to bottom remade in with current lighting and visuals and textures and everything. It makes no sense that Demon Souls is still the best looking video game. I don't understand how that's possible. And what a crazy standard to set that every game since then has seemed insanely buggy and incomplete. Obviously, it's a remake, right? We're not talking like they have to make brand new content, Blue Point. But I was talking about it on the Kind of Funny Games Daily Post show. It's like in December, we had Miles Morales on PS5 and we had Demon Souls Remake on PS5. And a couple months after that, we got Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. And it's like, dude, how did those games 2-3 years ago, how are those still more impressive than anything else that's come out? I don't understand, like, I guess those were pre-pandemic games, right? But god damn, it's wild. Yeah, Forbidden West, yeah, that's a good point. Forbidden West is a very, very good looking game. It's just crazy to me, you know? Anyway.
Havel in an awkward spot. He's a battlefield compatriot of Lord Gwyn, and yet Gwyn allied with a magic-wielding, traitorous dragon that Havel hates. In Dark Souls 1, it's implied that Havel was locked away by a dear friend, and all that time ago, we theorized that it was Gwyn himself who locked his hollowed friend away. We also talked about how a piece of occult weaponry was capable of killing the gods, and it was locked away in a basement with the rest of Havel's gear, and this fueled some theory that Havel plotted against the gods. In Lordran, Havel remained locked in that basement, but in Dark Souls 3, perhaps we see a different path to Havel's tale. We find armaments left by Havel himself in Archdragon Peak, and we can easily theorize that Havel was the dragon slayer mentioned in the Tale of Sacred Oath. A brave dragon slayer, the keyword being brave, who never flinched or retreated from battle, and had good cause to take up arms with the Nameless King, who was another leader positioned to rebel against Gwyn and Seath the Scaleless. Of course, to play devil's advocate, Havel could also be there to slay the Nameless King. He is overlooking the corpse of an against Gwyn and Seath the Scaleless. Of course, to play devil's advocate, Havel could also be there to slay the Nameless King. He is overlooking the corpse of an ancient dragon, after all, but as a final piece of proof that he's on the Nameless King's side, the half-dragon summoners, the ones with the frilly necks that summon phantoms to fight against you, they summon warriors of Havel to fight. Also, I want to point out that they summon a half-naked dude wielding Ricard's rapier
this freak!
And wearing a crown, so I'm assuming this is Ricard as well, and it links Prince Ricard to a king, it links him to the Way of the Dragon, and it links him to yet another castle full of half-dragon snake creatures.
Andy, will you replay Bloodborne when they remake it? Low skill plays? I would be an idiot not to. Not only do I want to, obviously, but that will be a content goldmine. Never ever will my YouTube channel and Twitch channel pop off more than when we eventually replay a remastered or remade version of Bloodborne. It's if I had like a financial advisor, he'd be like, "Oh, you should do that." Yeah. It'll be like when Elden Ring came out and my YouTube channel was getting double the views than it usually gets, you know?
So, that is pretty much everything surrounding the Nameless King explained. So what do you believe? The story is really open-ended, and I've given you most of the raw information you need to tell your own story.
Thank you, Big
Regardless, now
Chanchito.
you know the story of Archdragon
And Mr.
Peak,
Hawks.
where the son of Gwyn switched sides, separated himself from the fire-linking fiasco, and, assumedly, quietly began rebuilding the ranks of the ancient dragons. So we just talked about...
It's not as special as a first playthrough IMO. Flint, you gotta understand, though, that this brain forgets a lot. Like, a lot. So, like, there will be plenty that I remember doing, and there will be a lot that I don't. And there's a lot of optional stuff I didn't do. I didn't fight Ebritas. I didn't do the DLC. So there's like a lot that I haven't seen in that game. I'll tell you what, this freaking remake or remaster, they better fix Ebrieta's collision. Because I've heard stories about that shit. I don't want it.
How Havel hated a dragon named Seath the Scaleless,
A lot,
traitorous,
Scott.
mad pale drake whose twisted soul clearly lives on in Osiris, the consumed king. Osiris was once king of Lothric, married to a queen who was revered as
So
a
wet,
goddess
Chad.
of fertility and bounty.
What a weird couple, bro. What a weird couple. Big boob mommy and fucking wet lizard guy. Like, what is the... This is like some Hollywood couple type shit. You got fucking like Johnny Depp here. Just a weird wet lizard man. And just an insane 10 out of 10. Crazy.
So we just talked about
Yeah,
how
goth
Havel
boyfriend,
hated
Instagram
a
girlfriend,
dragon
exactly.
named Seath the Scaleless, a traitorous, mad pale drake whose twisted soul clearly lives on in Osiris.
Pete Davidson and
the
Kim
consumed king.
Kardashian.
Osiris was once king.
I mean,
of
Pete
Lothric.
Davidson and anybody. Let's be honest.
Traitorous, mad pale drake whose twisted soul clearly lives on in Osiris, the consumed king. Osiris was once king of Lothric, married to a queen who was revered as a goddess of fertility and bounty, much like Guinevere from Dark Souls 1, and as we know from the previous video, the Lothric line was obsessed with creating a worthy heir, and the rite of the linking of the fire. Osiris, however,
W
in his
Riz,
later
dude.
years, became fascinated with dragons. His research led him to the heretics of the Grand Archives of Lothric, where he discovered the twisted worship of Seath the Pale Drake. Eventually, he discovered the research that was done by Big Hat Logan, who you'll remember from Dark Souls 1. He was this legendary scholar who went mad delving into Seath's sorceries. So Osiris was inspired, he was edified by Big Hat Logan, and he even learnt how to perform.
Great word, edified. Great word. Put that on the list of good words, chat.
He was edified by Big Hat Logan, and he even learnt how to perform the crystal breath of Seath the Scaleless. He was transforming into this dragon.
That's
he was
awesome.
Changing, and behind Osiris,
This is
we
cool
see the
lore.
rest of his chambers, and they're full of dragon scales and dead man serpents, and there's even a Drakeblood Knight in the Way of the Dragon pose. Osiris himself was clearly somewhat successful.
Big Hat Logan is one of Mike's friends. Well, yeah, my friend Jew with the U and Scuba Steve and Big Hat Logan.
Turning into an ancient dragon, and given his admiration for Seath, it seems that he took on Seath's soul aspects. Osiris became this blind, mutated pale drake just like Seath, and he was obsessed with this notion that he could use his royal blood for a, and I quote, greater purpose. So he fathered this crossbreed child with his queen and named him Ocelot. After giving birth to Ocelot,
Ocelot.
the youngest child,
Ocelot. Huh. RPG Saint, thanks for 18 months of support, RPG Saint. What do you mean,
after giving
Ocelot?
birth to Ocelot, her youngest child, the Queen of Lothric quietly disappeared. Let's talk about the Queen a little bit. This Queen
Please, let's
either
do.
takes after Guinevere, or is Guinevere. Because in Dark Souls 1, Guinevere left the ailing land of Lordran in exactly the same manner that this Queen leaves the ailing land of Lothric. Also, Guinevere of Dark Souls 1 also pushes the chosen undead to link the fire, and in Dark Souls 3, the Queen of Lothric is obsessed with finding people to link the fire, even placing powerful rings in the untended graves in the hope that one day an unkindled would rise to link the fire. So the parallels between these two are undeniable. And with the flame fading in Dark Souls 3 and this pus of man spreading across the castle, the Grand Archives, where Osiris learnt all of his knowledge, closed its doors for good, and Osiris remained, walled off behind this garden, clutching his dragon crossbreed Ocelot. Many assassins were dispatched to his domain, but none returned. We learn that the consumed king ascribed his resilience to the divine protection of the dragon scale. And when we stumble through the consumed garden, we find this pale drake cradling
She's like, can
his
someone
invisible
please link the fire? One of y'all.
And we learn that the consumed king ascribed his resilience to the divine protection of the dragon scale. And when we stumble through the consumed garden, we find this pale drake cradling his invisible infant crossbreed before the fight. He's a very vocal boss, which is rare, and I think we need to dissect every line of his dialogue.
Ah, you ignorant slaves. Finally taken notice, have you? Of the power of my beloved Ocelot, child of dragons. Well, I will not give him up, for he is all that I have.
So first
freaky.
off, he calls us ignorant slaves, and I think this means that he's arrogant and he sees his subjects as slaves, or perhaps he's referring to us being slaves to the linking of the fire, which Lothric is known for.
That's what it seems like.
Then he says, "Finally taken notice, have you?" Which explains how he hasn't been disturbed for a very long time. He is out of the way, he's not a main boss, and he's also behind this fair line of defense and within a locked-off castle. We know it's been a long time because the main boss we fight in this area also gives us that impression. Osiris believes that this crossbreed child named Ocelot is worth taking notice of, but is he really? Ocelot is the crying baby in the boss fight, and if we could see it, we would probably see that it's a crossbreed between a dragon and the royal bloodline.
Big boobs.
And crossbreeds of this type have existed in the past. 3 others we know of are the Emerald Herald, Yorshka, locked up in the tower,
Loves
and
crying babies,
most
dude.
notably Priscilla from Dark Souls 1. All that time ago in Dark Souls 1, we theorized that Priscilla was a crossbreed between a lord and a dragon. Specifically, a lot of people said that she was the offspring of Seath the Scaleless and Guinevere, and that parentage is really strongly mirrored here between Osiris and his queen, who's basically Guinevere. And maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but Priscilla also had the ability to turn invisible, which explains why Ocelot, the baby he appears to be cradling, cannot be seen. And if Osiris is blind, like Seath was, then perhaps he's not even aware.
You remember Priscilla? Okay, chill out, guys. She threatened me, okay? Chill out.
Invisible, which explains why Ocelot, the baby he appears to be cradling, cannot be seen. And if Osiris is blind, like Seath was, then perhaps he's not even aware that his child is invisible. Priscilla also had this ability called Life Hunt, which apparently the gods feared. Presumably, Life Hunt, though it is never properly described, can harm the gods.
Thanks for the raid,
And
Christian.
maybe the threat of this was what made the Queen of Lothric leave her home this time around. Because it is easy to believe that Osiris would turn against his own kingdom. After all, Seath's soul line, as I'm calling it, they've all been betrayers. Seath betrayed the ancient dragons, the Duke of the Writhing Ruins in Dark Souls 2 set spiders upon the townsfolk, and I think it's most likely that Osiris hoped that this crossbreed child would be this powerful weapon with Life Hunt, based on how he talks about it during the fight. However, this crossbreed didn't turn out as Osiris hoped, clearly, and Osiris's plan, maybe not such a great one. He is always referenced as deluded and mad.
Ah, dear little Ocelot, where have you gone? Are you hiding from me? Come out. Come out. Don't be afraid. You were born a child of dragons. What could you possibly fear? Now, show yourself, Ocelot. My dear little Ocelot.
Originally, Osiris resembles a father fighting
For
to protect
real,
his child,
Melissa.
but as he nears death, he seems to become increasingly frustrated with his crossbreed's lack of power.
Is that where he
appears even to
crushed it?
smash this baby he was cradling upon the ground, and he reverts to a more feral
Oh,
stage
Jesus.
as he fights for his life against us. The baby, however, it continues to cry
Oh.
even after this, so yeah, maybe it's still alive. So, what are the consequences of Osiris's treachery? Well, the collapse of his rule was probably this fair part
Fuck
of the
them
collapse of the castle and even of Lothric Kingdom. Plus, the pus of man is concentrated a lot in his garden, but apart from that, like the Nameless King, I can't see that his decisions had this huge impact upon the world. In the previous video, we talked about how the Lothric bloodline resorted to unspeakable means to find a worthy heir to link the fire, and my last thoughts on this boss are that perhaps Ocelot was created with similar intent to Shanalot, the dragon crossbreed of Dark Souls 2 that men hoped would ward off the fire-linking curse. What's unclear is whether Osiris also fathered Lorien and Lothric, who are the two children of the royal bloodline who refused to link the fire.
Whoa, what are they
the
doing out
eldest,
here?
He was raised as a knight, and before his brother's curse crippled him, he was famed for single-handedly slaying the demon prince, leaving his sword eternally scorched with fire. I'd wager that this demon prince is probably related to the old demon king, if only because they're the only hints of demon royalty that we've ever seen in the game. And if these two are related, then maybe the arena that you fight the old demon king in is also related. There are piles of dead demon kin corpses, which signifies that some battle took place here. And of all these demons,
made before the DLC?
Demon
Gotcha.
King is the only one to remain. Now, like a clump of burnt ash, he's the last living witness of the chaos of Izalith. The Chaos Flame of Izalith was born when the Witch of Izalith attempted to use her own soul to create another First Flame. Instead, she turned into this tumultuous bed of chaos which birthed demons from the fire, beings that bore the smouldering essence of the Chaos Flame and were doomed eventually to perish. The Old King's hammer
Awful
has
boss
survived
fight. Worst
since
boss
old
ever.
Izalith and is imbued with remnants of the Chaos Flame. We've talked about the Chaos Flame so much over the years, and in Dark Souls 3 we definitely see when it and demon kind are at their lowest point. Stray demons, Capra demons, Taurus demons, and even hidden centipede demons, they're all dead in this arena, and one stray demon we do face out in the world even lacks a trace of flame, showing how core this flame is to their survival.
The Nerd Tree Avatar
So,
chat.
The demon race and the Chaos Flame, it's demonstrably at its lowest point.
I forgot I fought this
All
boss.
of this said, demons are...
This was such a forget. Like, when looking at it for a second, I was like, oh yeah, Dark Souls 1. I totally forgot I fought this boss.
At its lowest point in the series. All of this said, demons are a largely undeveloped part of the lore, and I really do wish that they were designed to be more than just brutish enemies, you know? With the old Demon King, though, I liked it at the end of the fight. You might not have noticed, but if you keep him alive at around 10% health, he, in this desperate attempt to fend us off with one final effort, he releases all of his remaining energy. He fails, and then he stays panting on the ground indefinitely, unable even to lift his great hammer.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Surrounded by the corpses of his kind, and he's the last piece of his race, just reduced to
that's
flimsily
awesome.
batting us away with one hand. That kind of scene where there's no cutscene, there's no break in the gameplay, and it still shows, you know, an emotion, a feeling that it wants to convey, that's good game design, and I feel like it's lost on a lot of people because most people will just finish this guy off in that last 10% of his health, but...
Do what, buddy? Most people are what?
It's a powerful scene. And finally, the curse-rotted Greatwood, rooted in the undead settlement. The undead settlement is
That's an
home to
optional
many-
boss? This is an optional boss?
And finally, the curse-rotted Greatwood, rooted in the undead settlement. The undead settlement is a home to many undead, and it's full of workers who are dedicated to the dissection and the burial of themselves. Because it makes sense that in this village and refuge full to the brim with undead,
Interesting.
that the primary task would end up being, what do we do with all the bodies that keep rising from the grave? There's just this sheer problem of overpopulation, which could never be properly reduced because they never die. And as a result, in this place, you find undead caged together, dissected, hung, and buried, but probably just rising from the dead all the same to begin the process over again. Eventually, teachers from the Cathedral of the Deep came to take advantage of this climate in the undead settlement. The evangelists, all women, came to enlighten inhabitants of the undead settlement and sent carriers on the path to sacrifice, most likely to the Cathedral of the Deep, where they would be consumed by Aldrich as a sacrifice. So, given this, it's no surprise really that all manner of curses managed to seep into the undead settlement, for undead were being dissected, their bones were being ground to dust, and they were buried within the earth. Rooted within that same soil, that same earth, was a spirit tree that would become known as the curse-rotted Greatwood.
You gotta hit them
Spirit
sacks,
trees
chat.
are another really undeveloped part of Souls lore, and they appear mostly in item descriptions from Dark Souls 2. It's really easy to skip any description of a spirit tree. So let's talk about what we know. They're described as magical, sentient, and supposedly possessing divine powers. Two descriptions
And very
in
horny.
particular reference them as appearing in a dream world related to
They expose
Quella,
themselves
who is
to
the
you.
goddess of dream. There was this one talking spirit tree that also turned itself into a shield to protect a small, frightened child.
Aww.
I also have a hunch that this green tree that repairs items in Dark Souls 2 in the Sunken Kingdom, I think it could be another type of spirit tree as well. But again, this is just an educated guess. There's not much we know about these creatures. At any rate, the worst of the curses in the undead settlement were sealed away inside this spirit tree. Maybe it happened naturally, or maybe the townsfolk hoped that the tree would purify said curses, but eventually, however, the curses took their toll and festered in the belly of the Greatwood. So let's talk about what we find in the belly of the Greatwood. One thing we find is the transposing kiln, which is this artifact from Corland stitched with crystal lizard hide.
Before I was a Lord of Cinder, I was a student of transposition, the process of extracting and coalescing the essence of a soul. A forbidden art that once left a foul stain upon Corland's honor. 'Tis an art that grants powers once thought unattainable. Most transposing kilns were lost with Corland, but this place is a crossing for all manner of cursed objects.
Unwanted, cursed items were what was sealed within the Greatwood, so it makes a degree of sense that the forbidden transposing kiln would also be sealed within it at some point. And with Ludleth's help, this kiln allows souls to be turned into a form we can use, like a weapon or a ring. These items reflect the souls that they were transposed from, and give us more insight into that being. Ludleth himself, for example, drops the skull ring, which was a wonder transposed from the soul of a soul feeder, a beast that insatiably absorbed souls to feed its own power.
This is the one that attracts more enemies to you,
When
right?
we transpose the curse-rotted Greatwood soul, we aren't getting items related to the Greatwood, we're kind of getting items that were related to the curses that were within the Greatwood. For example, one is the Spear of
Me
Arstor,
too,
who
Nude
was
Safety,
this
me too.
Knight from Karim, fond of impaling his enemies, and he was credited with the dreadful creation of the Bite set of rings. This is one thing we get from within the Greatwood. Another is the Hollow Slayer Greatsword, which harbours the fears that lurk within the minds of Hollows, and is more effective at killing them. So this sword, it's fairly well known in Souls. It once belonged to Lucatiel of Dark Souls 2, and you might be able to see why the Hollows of the Undead Settlement would seal this sword away. It was known for killing their kind, and that's one hell of a curse to them. Let's talk about some comments from the previous video before I end this video. Siesta Yon Jugo says, "Why do you assume Aldrich saw Yorshka in his dream? Wouldn't Priscilla make more sense?" So Siesta is referring to the fact that Aldrich can cast a version of Life Hunt Scythe, and Life Hunt Scythe was a spell that Priscilla used, and he's wondering why I think that Aldrich saw Yorshka. And he's right, Priscilla might make more sense in retrospect, but my thinking is based around my theory of a lot of the characters in the game. You know how...
because I said so fuck off.
Earlier we were talking about Osiris and how he takes after Seath. Well, in my perspective, Osiris pretty much represents Seath in this game, and in the same sort of manner, Yorshka, to me, represents Priscilla. And that goes a bit more deeper than just being a descendant. I think that she fits the same role in this timeline as Priscilla did in her timeline. Priscilla was a crossbreed locked away in a painting near Anor Londo, and Yorshka is also a crossbreed locked away in a tower near Anor Londo. Both of them were probably locked away for being crossbreeds, and yeah, so when I say he dreamt of Yorshka, I assume that Yorshka would have the same Life Hunt Scythe skill, and Yorshka inhabits this world, whereas Priscilla hasn't been proved to inhabit this world. So that's why I said Yorshka, but yes, you're right, I think, because Aldrich is devouring Gwendolyn, who would probably have knowledge of Priscilla, even if it did occur a very long time ago. So that was my thinking. Hope that kind of makes sense, but I'm glad for the chance to clarify. Guy Dude left a comment that basically summed up what I was talking about in the video. He says, "I want Water Souls, the future Aldrich saw now." And Aldrich says, "What?" And then Gabriel says, "Yeah, enough of this fire linking crap. I want to link the sink." And to lead us out, a poem by P-Dragon on Aldrich. "He ate my waifu, so I ended his lifeu." Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, check out some more. Maybe become a patron if you want to support the channel. But regardless, thank you for viewing this.
Great video, Vadi. Great video. Let's leave another comment because we leave comments for the algorithm. Great video, Vadi. Click like right there. And that's it for, I guess, our lore watch part 1, because we're going to do a lot more lore watching in another episode. We're going to do all the Prepare to Cries. We're going to watch this Ring City parts 1 and 2. I'm very excited. If you enjoyed this, click like, subscribe, and then also follow all the other creators that we watched today. It was mainly Vadi, and the other guy I forgot, but he's at the beginning of the video. Dave, maybe? Go follow Dave. Bye, everybody. I hope I got the name right. I had to double check, but his name is Dave. Dave Control. Go follow Dave as well, along with Vadi Video. The links will be in the description and the comments. Okay, bye, everybody. Love you all.